Recording in progress.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Louisville, Colorado City Council meeting of Tuesday, April 4th, 2023. We have a roll call, please.
Mayor Maloney,
Here.
Councilmember Lay,
Here.
Councilmember Most,
Here.
Councilmember Dickinson,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Fahey,
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton, here, Councilmember Hefner.
Here.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Oh, second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Next, we're going to move on to public comments on items not on the agenda and items on the consent agenda. This is a chance for anyone to speak to any item not on the agenda or an item on the consent agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Please tell us your name and if you are a Louisville resident. And I do have one card sign up for Joshua Cooperman. You should sit closer. You're signed up for 4.
Josh Cooperman, I live at 216 Griffith Street. I just wanted to make 2 short comments, one on item G and one on item N. G is the fuel purchase contract. I think last year in the consent agenda, there was some historical data on how much fuel the city had actually used each year, and that was not in the packet this year. I thought it was nice to be able to see how much we had used over the previous years and to see if we were reducing how much fuel we were using or not. I hope we are making efforts to reduce the amount of fuel that we're using. And then the other item is N, which is about the housing study contract. I would just like to say that I'm really glad to see that that contract is going through. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Susan Myers.
Good evening. My name is Susan Myers. I'm a resident of Louisville, and I have been for over 30 years. I am here today to advocate for affordable housing for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Both of my children were raised in Louisville. My 33-year-old son, David, currently works at the Arc in Louisville. He works at the Post in Lafayette, takes the Dash all around town, goes downtown and has a beer, supports sports teams in the community. But unfortunately, if he doesn't live at home with his dad and I, he doesn't have a place to live in this community that he dearly, dearly loves. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities have extremely limited choices on where they can live when they want to move out of the family home. Currently, over 70% of the people with intellectual and developmental disabilities live at home. Of that group, almost 30% live with caregivers that are over the age of 60, and I'm in that group. I lay awake at night wondering where on earth my son is going to be able to live when my husband and I can no longer take care of him. He would love to move out tomorrow. He would love to have his own apartment, but he can't afford to live any place in Louisville in this community that he dearly, dearly loves. And he's very comfortable in. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities really bond to a community, and that's their home, and they need to stay there. For a number of different reasons, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities have very low incomes. They're limited by Social Security, they're limited by asset capping. A lot of them are underemployed if they do have a job. So when we're talking about affordable housing for this population, we are talking about extremely lower income levels that we need to look at. I'm excited to hear that Louisville is doing a study on different housing options as we move into the future. My goal would be to work with Louisville on how this population can be addressed in the study, how we can make a place for this wonderful population of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to be included in this community that they love. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wants to make comments on the consent agenda or items, any other item? Not seeing any. I don't, anybody that's on the Zoom call wish to make comments? All right, I don't see any. So are there any changes or motions to the consent agenda by council? We have a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item we're going to move on to is council informational comments on pertinent items not on the agenda. Mayor Pro Tem Fahey.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I had one request. Shortly after the fire, I guess the council decided not to put in what I would probably consider a sufficient number of security cameras, particularly the ones that read license plate numbers for cars going in and out of the burn areas. I would like to do a further discussion where we could possibly increase the number and location of those cameras. There's been a lot of theft occurring in the fire-damaged neighborhoods, and the damage and the theft includes people stealing the security cameras that residents have put on their own property. Exactly. So we need to do something to help protect the residents who have already lost everything and now they're losing more. So if that could be set as a future agenda item to discuss that?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and I noted that the city manager was writing furiously, so we're hoping that you have enough pages for notes tonight. All right. Councilor Most.
Just quickly, I wanted to just thank Sue Myers for speaking tonight. And I know, I've had conversations with the city manager about pursuing a broad representation of our community to include in the housing study. I know that's part of the contract, which talks about community outreach. So I just want to put an emphasis on the fact that it is my understanding that consultant's going to really look at all these different aspects of who is in our community, what kind of housing we're looking at. I've commented before that for many people in our community, living in their home is their affordable house, especially now with interest rates 3 times what they were, I think about 10 years ago. So I think we're all on that page. I think the city staff is on that page. I just wanted to reiterate and make that public comment. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? So I want to take this opportunity to thank the Deputy City Manager, Megan Davis. This is her last council meeting. Friday is her last day working for the city of Louisville. It's been my honor and privilege to work with you. Twice you've stepped up as a Deputy City Manager into the manager role. One time was planned and one time was not. Both times your work was excellent, and I think we all appreciate your integrity, your professionalism, your leadership, and almost seamlessly making sure that all the city services continued on. So I'm only going to speak for myself, and I'm sure my colleagues will do that as well. But I want to thank you for your time here at Louisville. You've made a big difference. We were in a meeting this morning talking about legislative issues, and you're going to leave a big hole at the city of Louisville. But I want to personally thank you for everything. Others have comments? Mayor Pro Tem?
I will echo everything that the mayor just said. I think you've done an amazing job. You're so accomplished, and you have a way of presenting information in a way that people on both sides of an issue will accept the research that you've done and the intelligence that you bring to a decision. Your legislative knowledge is just beyond what I could even fathom. So thank you for your many years of service, and I hope that you go forth happily.
Others have comments? Yes, Councilor Lay, and then we'll go to Councilor Mills.
I remember when Heather announced that you were going to be joining us, and Heather was doing a little happy dance about what a coup she had scored. she did that out of earshot of folks from the county who were not so happy about your leaving. And I know that you absorbed a great deal from Heather's leadership and watched her carefully. I know that she mentored you, and that's a good thing. And I know that from just things that you said, that you felt sometimes like it was a little bit of a battlefield promotion to take over when she stepped out, and it was probably not quite as equal a battlefield promotion when the city manager had to step out for a few months. But I think you've acquitted yourself really marvelously. I think you've shown incredible poise in very, very, very difficult circumstances over and over again. I've had the opportunity to work with you on a whole bunch of different initiatives, from DEI to some of the stuff that the Metro Maris did in Washington just a few weeks ago, and we're going to miss that level of steadiness and your knowledge of intergovernmental relations, which is so important. I know that we will manage, but we will manage differently, and you've made us better and raised our game. So thank you for your service. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilor Most?
I'll just add, from my experience being a newbie when I came on to the council, and then being thrust into the, a real crisis situation, I just think your professionalism and your responsiveness and empathy have really left an important imprint on this community and, on our staff, and I just really appreciate you for that.
Thank you. Councilor Dickinson?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just pile on as well. The camera's not on you, so I can't see you right now. I'm just talking to my screen. But I've so enjoyed getting to know you over the last few years, and I echo everything that's been said. Such professionalism, and such an amazing person to work with, and it's just incredibly lucky to be able to have you step in as an interim city manager, because you're so, as people said, steady and calm and well versed in the issues, and so we really never skipped a beat, and it could have been total chaos, and it just wasn't. And so I appreciate everything that you've done for us, and I'll miss you, and glad I got to see you a couple weeks ago. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Councilor Hamilton?
Although I just joined City Council, I was immediately impressed by your leadership, and thank you for welcoming me with open arms and truly embracing no question is a stupid question. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you.
Councilor Hefner?
Thank you, and I'll just go last and echo everything that's been said, and in particular, I'm glad we got to overlap long enough that I could download 1% of your Dr. Cog knowledge, and I look forward to learning the other 99% at some point.
Thank you, colleagues, for your nice comments. So thank you. And, we cannot move ahead without having cake. But if you would like to make some comments, and then we'll go to cake.
Thank you. I love cake, so I'll keep it brief. I think others like cake too, so thank you so much for the very kind comments. I appreciate it. It means a lot to me. It really means a lot to me to have had the privilege to serve this community over the past 5.5 years. I have just been continuously impressed with the community itself, how we have weathered everything that has happened in the last couple of years. The staff is just unbelievable and unparalleled, and I have learned so very much from my colleagues and every single person in the organization. So I feel really grateful for that experience, and I also feel great knowing that the city is in the capable hands of City Manager Durbin, and it is, I think, going in such a wonderful direction under the leadership of City Council. And I want to thank you all personally, both the new folks and folks who've been around for several years, council members, for your support during a lot of really challenging times, whether it was budget times or pandemic times or natural disaster times. It's been kind of unbelievable, and I think you have done an incredible job on behalf of the community, serving them to respond, and our staff at the city has as well. So I feel very grateful that I had the chance to be here, even during those hard times, and I am looking forward to taking a little bit of a break. So thank you for supporting me in that decision too. So, thank you.
Okay, you can be first in line to cake, but we're going to be right behind you. So we're going to take a 10-minute break, celebrate a little bit of cake break. So. We're going to resume the council meeting. Thank you all for, helping us celebrate with the deputy city manager with some cake. The next item on the agenda is the city manager's report.
I have no report. I was just going to cede my time to our deputy city manager, so I've got nothing further. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next item of business is regular business. And we will start with the internal decarbonization plan update. So I think we have a staff presentation.
Not sure why it's not. Oh. I don't know why it's not working. Do you have it on a file? Is it on here? Do you have it on a question? I can run it from my computer. Off the screen. Oh, there it is. Okay. Good evening, Council and Mayor. Thank you for your patience here as we figured out our technical difficulties. Thank you for your time tonight. My name is Kayla Betzold, and I'm the Sustainability Coordinator with the city. I am joined tonight by the team at McKinstry Engineering to provide you with an update on the city's internal decarbonization plan. So before I turn it over to McKinstry, I wanted to give you a little bit of background information on this project. The internal decarbonization plan was included originally on the 2022 City Council work plan. And starting in June of last year, a staff team started meeting regularly to discuss departmental goals and priorities in regards to municipal decarbonization. So with all of that information, we created an RFP and asked for an engineering firm to provide a detailed analysis of each of our municipal facilities and that facility's associated fleet and equipment, with the goal of creating a strategic roadmap for electrification and decarbonization of all facilities, fleet, and equipment by 2030. City Council approved this RFP in July and approved the contract with McKinstry in November. And this item appears again on the 2023 City Council work plan, and this time it directs staff to complete the roadmap and begin the implementation of the internal decarbonization plan. So we're here tonight to provide you with an update on the project, to discuss the full implementation timeline, and give you a little bit more information on the technological feasibility and some of the cost impacts of the plan, and to incorporate any direction that you may have for us in regards to the project, which is scheduled to be complete in July of this year. Now I'd like to pass it to Brian Goldkrump from McKinstry to provide details on the work that's been done from November until now. And then after the presentation, the McKinstry team, along with myself and Kurt Koer, the Public Works Director, will be available for any questions you may have for us. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for your time this evening. I just wanted to start by saying that it has been a pleasure working with Kayla and Kurt and the rest of the city staff on this project. And we are excited to discuss this with you tonight, give you an update, and let you know what we've been up to. So getting started, I'll just elaborate a little bit more on what Kayla said. So the main goal of this project being to develop a roadmap for decarbonization of the city's assets by 2030. And what we're really honing in on when we talk about decarbonization is mechanical system and building electrification, as well as fleet electrification and operations and parks equipment electrification, as well as identifying load reduction and energy efficiency measures. And we are pairing that with renewables, so helping decide for the city what is the best value when it comes to city-owned renewables versus utility-owned, and really tying all those together to give the city the best value for reaching their decarbonization goals. So the team consists of course, it's led by Kayla, and then myself, Brian Goldcrump. I'm a senior mechanical engineer with McKinstry. My colleague Ashley Brazovan is also leading the project with me. She was unable to make it tonight, but I'm also joined by Leslie LaRock, our VP of Marketing and Sales, and she'll be talking in a few minutes about the funding and financing options. And just a quick timeline. We began in November, as Kayla alluded to. We're about halfway done now, so this is the time to give you an update on where we are. And we plan on wrapping up the project into June, early July, with the goal of moving into implementation shortly after. So I'll talk a bit more about what this process is. So we have 10 city-owned facilities and sites, and we broke that up into 3 different groups of buildings. So the first group is the Recreation and Senior Center, the library, and the police and court building. And then, so for that set of buildings, the process is we go out to the site with the facilities staff. We evaluate what's on site, what could possibly be improved, what decarbonization measures we can implement. And then we scope those measures, evaluate those measures, determine how much carbon can be reduced, how much, what will the utility costs be, what will the construction costs of implementing those decarbonization measures be, and bundle that all together. So that process has been completed for this first set of buildings, and we are in the process right now of performing the same steps for the second and third set of buildings, with the goal of eventually wrapping all that together into the roadmap to move into implementation. So to date, we have evaluated all city facilities. We've gone out to all the sites, walked them with the facility staff. Like I said, the first 3 buildings have been complete as far as our analysis and our pricing. So in that process, we analyzed 27 measures across the 3 buildings. We are not recommending all those measures. A part of our process is we put all ideas on the table, run them through different criteria, and evaluate which make the most sense by facility, by maintenance requirements, by first cost, and all that, and then refine that list down. And so that's what I'll be talking more about, the 3 buildings and what measures we identified and refined down to. We also hosted a financing workshop with city staff to discuss funding and financing opportunities for for the full suite of buildings. And through this process, for the first 3 buildings, we have so far identified about 2,500 metric tons of carbon reduction opportunities. So I'll talk for a few minutes about one building in particular, the Recreation and Senior Center. As you probably know, this is the largest building in the city's inventory by a sizable amount. It's the largest, it's the most complex, and as such, it also uses the most energy, which is not specific to the Louisville Recreation Center. It's pretty inherent in recreation centers, particularly when they have indoor pools, that they're going to use a lot of energy. So this building was identified as a good target to look at first, not only because it has some mechanical equipment that is due for replacement soon, but also because it has a lot of opportunity for carbon reduction. So up on the screen, we have the different types of measures we evaluated. The measures shown in bold are the ones that we moved forward into the recommendations. So we started with efficiency measures. We spent a lot of our focus and effort on mechanical electrification. When we are talking about decarbonization, that is probably the hardest part about decarbonizing buildings. So we're recommending heat pump, HVAC, and pool heating and domestic water heating systems. Heat pumps are a very readily available technology, so this is nothing new. It's not necessarily a risk or anything. It's a very time-tested and good electrified decarbonized system. We're also recommending the addition of some electric vehicle chargers, a relatively good-sized on-site renewable solar array, so that would be ground mount and sit to the south of the building, And we did evaluate a battery storage system for demand and load shedding. We found that the first cost was a little too much at the time for the savings we were going to get out of it. So we ended up not recommending that measure. We do think there's a place for that technology later on. It's still an evolving technology, so we expect the prices to come down pretty significantly in the future. So moving on a little bit to the financial and technical pieces for all the buildings. I'm sure your eyes went to the dollar signs first, so I wanted to give some context to those dollar signs. So for each building, these numbers, I'll stay focused on the Recreation and Senior Center. This $12 to $19 million represents the all-in construction costs. So this is hard costs, soft costs, development, permitting, all that. This is your all-in cost. There are a few other things that I'd like to say about it. So this range up here, the upper end, the $19 million, represents a fully electrified mechanical system. So this is removing all gas from the building. The smaller number, the 12 million, represents what we call a hybrid electrified system. So with this system, we are still electrifying the vast majority of the heating. We're removing most of the gas. We are still leaving some gas that would fire on the coldest day. So you would still have a little bit of gas usage, but for a significantly reduced cost, we're still able to achieve 85% carbon reduction. And a lot of the delta between those two numbers is there's a lot of electrical infrastructure upgrade needed to get that last bit of electrification. So that analysis has been a big part of us trying to find kind of the sweet spot and the best value of decarbonization for the city. Another item to discuss is the line below, the HVAC like-for-like costs. So for the rec center, that's $7 million. And what that number represents is those are the costs to maintain the existing system, the existing gas system. So the 12 to 19 is the total cost, but we also want to keep in mind that there are going to be costs for this building regardless of whether or not you decarbonize. The existing gas systems are going to need to be replaced at a certain point, and that's what that $7 million represents for the rec center. So we wanted to both give the all-in cost, but also give the context of the costs you would be incurring anyways, so that we could establish, here's the actual delta for decarbonization. And one other thing about the rec center specifically is the way the rec center is phased is such that not all that equipment needs to be replaced at the same time. So the $12 to $19 million would not all occur in 1 year. It would happen across a few different years. Specifically for the rec center, a lot of the equipment is going to need to be replaced in the next couple of years, but the rest of the equipment was installed in 2018 when the building was expanded. So it is not ready. It will not be ready to be replaced in 2030. So something that we do want to talk about is what happens beyond 2030, which I'll talk about again in a second, but just wanted to highlight that either way, those costs are not all going to occur in 1 year. And these costs do include not just HVAC electrification, although that is the biggest portion by far. They also do include EV charging, solar, and load reduction and energy efficiency measures. And with that, I will pass it over to Leslie.
Hi, good evening. My name is Leslie LaRocque. I am a vice president with McKinstry. I've been with the company for 16 years now, and I'm a resident of Colorado, been here for 45 years, dedicated my last 20 years of my career to helping local governments figure out and meet their energy efficiency and renewable energy, and now decarbonization goals. So very exciting. We're really excited about the work that this team has been doing. I wanted to talk about funding opportunities. As Brian mentioned, of course, there is a cost to changing out systems and taking natural gas systems to electrification and getting to a place where you are 100% electrified, and then that is powered by renewable energy, which is, I think, what everybody's goal is over time. But we're in a really exciting time right now. We happen to be living in a state that has a lot of grant money that is being allocated to this kind of work. We also had the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act And there are tons of opportunities that are available right now and others that are coming down the pike for grant money and tax incentives and things that we can use to help offset that incremental cost to building electrification. Just wanted to talk about a couple of them. Some of the local grants, there are grants in the $500,000 to $1 million range that are coming from Department of Local Affairs. There's a building electrification grant very specific to this kind of work that's also available now. A geothermal grant, and then Kayla worked really hard on an application for some congressionally directed spending from both Hickenlooper's office as well as Bennett's office, and I think we also submitted one to Congressman Neguse. So hopefully there'll be some pretty significant millions of dollars coming into the pot here pretty soon. There are opportunities through FEMA. The Inflation Reduction Act, again, will have lots of grant opportunities, but one of the things that's really exciting is that the tax incentives that have been available primarily only to private entities are now available to public sector in the form of a direct payment. So it basically looks like a rebate. So if you do a solar PV system or battery storage system, or you electrify systems with heat pumps and geothermal, those things are all available now to receive a tax credit. We don't have all of the guidance yet. Some of that's still coming out from the federal government, but it's really a reduction of anywhere between 25% to 50% of the project costs that could come back in the form of these federal tax incentive rebates. So very exciting stuff, and we're working with a lot of entities right now to actually go through that process. So we're learning as we go, but it's pretty exciting in the way that the cash flow would work for a city. Of course, there's rebates from the utilities. Department of Energy is going to have grants. So this is the kind of work that we would typically do, and a partnership is, work with Kayla and her team to always be consistently looking at these opportunities. And as the roadmap would be implemented over time, taking advantage of any monies that can come down the pike to help offset those incremental costs. Okay.
So what is next for us? We will be, as I said, wrapping up the second and third batch of buildings and making sure we're finding all the best decarbonization measures for the city. That includes finalizing the energy and carbon analysis, as well as our cost estimates. And then next time you see us, we will be bringing with us the strategic roadmap, where we will be plugging all that information into a timeline to help the city understand how do you get to these goals and how much is it going to cost and when. So that's what's next from us. And then I mentioned the question of 2030. And so in our analysis, we found that if we were to stick to a 2030 goal of full decarbonization, we would end up retiring about 40% of the existing mechanical equipment early, before its end of life. Using the rec center as a good example, it's just equipment that has been installed too recently to have reached end of life. So an alternative recommendation would be to decarbonize as much as possible by 2030 and still go down that path. And then as the remaining units reach their end of useful life, decarbonize those systems then. So wanted to put that out there for the council's consideration. And with that, I will open it up for discussion and question. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, and I believe that Councilor Hefner has a question. Before you jump in, so we're going to go for clarifications on the presentation. We'll have public comment, and then we can come back and ask as many questions as you want, if you want to go deeper.
Yeah, I just had one question on the slide that had the comparison for the rec center of the cost to retrofit today versus the cost, the business as usual sort of cost. I think it was 12 versus 7. Are those both essentially in 2023 dollars? Like that's what it would cost today to replace the existing systems versus retrofit?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and once we put those into a roadmap, we will assign escalation dollars when we figure out when those replacements would actually happen.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Most, and then Mayor Pro Tem Fahey.
Yeah, I have a question about the process. When you were going through this process, did you look at all at the existing energy efficiency of these buildings? Did you do any kind of an analysis? Particularly the rec center, where I'm often upstairs and the air conditioner is running when it's 60 degrees outside, and the front door is closed 90% of the time because it's too hot or it's too cold.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that. Yes, we did. A recommendation at pretty much every building is tuning the controls. You just mentioned the air conditioning being on when it might not need to be. So going through the process of recalibrating all that. We did also work with the rec and senior center staff to identify other measures that they thought might be useful. And so those are included.
Okay, thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem Fahey.
Thank you. Yes, I have a question on the generation of the electricity that'll be needed to decarbonize everything. Is that included in this research? I mean, are we going to be installing windmills or solar panels to cover the need of the additional electricity?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are proposing installing renewables. Yes, the renewables we are proposing will not cover the full, the added electricity due to electrification. We'll be looking to the grid for added electricity, but we will be supplementing it with on-site renewables.
Are any other questions before we go to public? All right, so we're going to go to public comment, and I'm certain you're going to come back and answer a lot more questions. Thank you for the presentation. Any public comment on this? Josh, you got to be on this one. Joshua Cooperman. Sorry, I only got one card. I have to keep going back to it.
Josh Cooperman, I live at 216 Griffith Street. I really appreciate the city's commitment to planning for the decarbonization of its facilities and operations. And I very much look forward to learning about the recommendations for all the remaining facilities when the completed plan comes before us later this year. Planning to decarbonize and then actually decarbonizing is absolutely essential for mitigating climate change. And I look forward to helping the city with all of this work. I really support the city's goal of fully decarbonizing its facilities by 2030. And I understand that referencing some of the comments made in tonight's presentation that it doesn't make sense to just rip out equipment that is still working, even if it uses natural gas in 2030. So I'd just like to make a small suggestion along those lines. Perhaps we could do some other things in the city which would have the effect of capturing carbon and could offset the remaining emissions that we might still have in 2030. For instance, by rewilding large portions of the city, like all the turf grass that we don't need and such. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? Please come up, just state your name and whether or not you're a citizen of Louisville, and you have 3 minutes.
So far, I'm a citizen of Louisville. My name's Rick Ratajczyk. I live in Louisville. I lost my home in the fire. I just had a couple of questions about the decarbonization. I mean, we talked, I've seen a lot about what was being presented. There's a lot of good information. There's a lot of missing information. Some of the information when we talk about heat pumps, there's not been any clarification on are we doing air source or ground source heat pumps? And I do want to make a correction to that. Even though heat pumps have been around for quite a long time, it's just recently, the last few years, that they've actually gained the efficiency where they've actually been, they actually give the benefit that they do now. So heat pumps are not as old as you're led to believe. Addition, as far as the electrification, we're talking about putting in batteries, solar panels. A lot of electrification is a generational thing. So these things usually last 10 to 20 years, especially batteries, depending on the type of batteries, lithium batteries or gel cell. What's it going to cost when those things need to be replaced? How much increase is that going to cost us? The other thing that really bothers me is, what's it going to cost me as a taxpayer? As a taxpayer in the city, I keep seeing the city constantly push business out. So we're not getting any taxes from any business. We're not getting any additional revenue from these businesses. So how much is this going to cost me if I stay here as far as a taxpayer? That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else? John, please come up, state your name, whether or not you're a citizen of Louisville. I know you're a neighbor.
Yes. Thank you. I'm John Cowley. I live on Fairfield Lane, just off Cherry Street. Just a couple of comments. One is, the real purpose of this is climate change. That's the elephant in the room. That's why we're doing this. If it weren't for climate change, we wouldn't have this discussion. Fighting climate change won't come completely free. And I think it'd be good for the city council to have a mindset that says, yes, it may cost something, but didn't the Marshall Fire cost something? So hopefully the city will be open to finding ways to come up with the funds to get some big things done. If the city asked me, I would donate $1,000 to a fund, and I bet, let's say 100 other people in Louisville would. There's $100,000. Just ask. We want to get this done, and I'm just throwing that idea out. And I had one question for the presenters. The rec center effort, does that include preheating of the water with rooftop water heating systems? That's a possible way to save some energy. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
Sherry Summer, 910 South Palisade Court. I'm really intrigued by the idea of these grants that are available, and I wonder when we'll find out if, possibly those will fill the extra expense between the routine and normal cost of maintenance and this new technology. And maybe, who knows, maybe we'll even save money. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think that's everybody in the room who wants to make a comment. So we're going to move to the Zoom calls. So first up is Don.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I would just like to request that the city council require detailed planning on electrical costs and defining the efficiency of what they're going to do. Also, because if the solar isn't going to cover everything, then the electricity is going to be high, and it needs to be really nailed down before the city goes forward. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. Anybody else on Zoom? Okay, seeing no one else, thank you for the public comment. The next part of this agenda item will be council questions and discussions. Anybody have questions and discussion from here? Councilor Lay?
Yeah, I was going to go back to the narrative, the progress narrative, because I noticed, we're running into this in a couple of different ways. And I'm actually on about page 373 of the packet, where there's a discussion around hybrid options. And what I understood you to say a little bit earlier is one of the challenges of fully electrifying is getting that last little bit of electrification. Sometimes it sounds like I don't know whether I'm getting this right, but the marginal cost of reaching that can be higher than it was to reach other levels. And part of that is it trying to replace a certain amount of energy that otherwise would have been provided by natural gas? Is that correct?
Yeah, basically, if we're going to use electricity, we need to use a electric resistance coil, which is not efficient compared to a heat pump. And so to supply power to that inefficient electric resistance coil, we need a pretty big electrical infrastructure upgrade at the building. So we're talking about bringing a new electrical service into the building, which it's really that piece itself that is expensive. It's not the electric heat, it's the getting the power to the electric heat is the big driver and cost increase.
Got it. And there's, I presume some of the infrastructure that we're dealing with on gas is not wearing out anytime immediately. Is that right? So to
Yeah.
whatever- okay.
Yeah, I would say it varies by building, but for the rec center, a lot of it was installed in 2018, so it's pretty new still.
And I figure you're probably going to just let us kind of know how that works. But one of the things, I mean, how the different options that are going to be available to us. The thing that caught my eye was something to the effect of Louisville may want to consider revising its full decarbonization target. And I don't know, that sort of stuck out at me, and I don't know whether that's something that you're going to be recommending or not. Maybe it depends on the eventual recommendations you're making to us. Do you have a preview of that? Or
And I think that's in regards to the 2030, so the full decarbonization by 2030.
got it. In terms of changing the date or changing?
Well, if we want to consider doing as much as we can by 2030 and then replacing the rest of the fossil fuel equipment at the end of its useful life, it wouldn't be full decarbonization by 2030. We'd be kind of looking out past 2030 and then, replacing the rest of it as it ends its lifetime, and then electrifying it at that point.
Got it. Thanks.
Councilor Hamilton.
I have, I guess, a comment on the 2030 goal and then also a question. To me, goals are meant to challenge you, and you don't always meet them, right? With that being said, I think something that would be really helpful, maybe at the next presentation, if possible, is it sounds like instead of the total sum being spent at once, you're proposing a phased plan that would spread those costs over time. Could there be some sort of graphical representation of at the time points at which those phases would occur, whether it's HVAC, panels, and then also showing us how carbon goes down as those systems are put in place for each of the buildings? I think that could help inform the 2030 goal and what our decision is on that.
That is exactly what we plan on doing. So yes.
There we go.
I agree.
This gig doesn't work out? All right, thank you.
And one more thing on that, so the deliverables for this project are the 10 specific building audit reports. So that will be detailed analysis on each of the 10 sites, which may contain multiple facilities, but looking at specific sites, really getting into the details on the mechanical systems, things like that. And then the roadmap is really the strategy piece. So that's what's the step-by-step approach when we're looking at all 10 facilities to really get us to this goal in this step-by-step manner between now and 2030.
Could the roadmap also include inflation over time to the point made earlier? Will it encompass that? Okay, and what about maintenance as well?
So the roadmap focuses more on first cost.
Yeah.
But as we make recommendations, we do take into account maintenance and life cycle costs, and maintenance would fall under life cycle costs.
Okay.
So it will be addressed. I'm not sure if it will be directly on the roadmap, but it will be addressed in the final deliverables, in the final report.
Okay, perfect,
Yeah.
thank you.
Councilor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mayor. Barbara, thanks for those comments. That was great. Just thinking about trying to see this vision over time, and I know it's really hard to put unsecured grant funds into a model and say like, well, but if we get these grant funds, it'll look like this. But I think that is an important part of the calculation, because it's real, right? We're talking about like, well, what kind of funds can we access while we do this? have a good comparison of, hey, in 5 years from now, you could replace this with something you have or replace it with something different. And the marginal cost of those is going to be a lot closer than the price tag of the new thing, right? Obviously, like, yeah, a new thing is going to be expensive, but you laid that out that, you're going to have to buy something. And so we're talking about the difference. And then if the thing you're buying has, rebates attached to it or a grant that can allow us to buy it, then obviously, we could be even looking at cost savings. But again, really hard to put a model in place where you say, and then you'll get a grant. But I think from a decision-making policy or a position, that's important information to see kind of over time when these things will be happening, what the real cost will be to us. And again, same thing with the maintenance, right? I mean, any unit's going to need maintenance. So what's the difference in maintenance costs with these newer ones? And then the other piece I'm just really curious about, and I don't know how it gets put into report, but it's just the unknowns of the technology changes in the next 5 years, right? So, what if we're replacing things in 2026, 28, 30? I mean, the effect of that new technology could be remarkable, right? And could have a huge impact. And so we're looking at, like, I would hope the 2018 equipment that we install at the rec centers is pretty high efficiency, and you're not going to get the same. If you were to replace it next year, you wouldn't even get the same level of benefit because you've got a brand new machine and you're replacing it with 2023 technology. The change is going to be great, but if you wait 7 years, or it sounds like end of life into the 30s, the technology we're going to have at that point is going to be different. And so I just think it's such a challenging exercise to kind of be looking out in the future when technology is changing as fast as it is. But those are kind of some things going through my head. I don't know if I have a specific request there. I just, these are big goals over a long period of time with millions and millions of dollars and so many externalities of what's going to happen. And I'm also reflecting on, our residents who are building after the fire and access to these things. So again, it's one thing to say, oh, we're going to bring in a whole new electrical system, and then, like, oh, but we can't find it, we can't access it, or its price has doubled because of the demand for it. And so wanting to be nimble, wanting to be flexible, wanting to figure out the best way to get this. And so I'm really excited to see this continue with that kind of level of detail of, where the money's best spent to get. I think as Chris was kind of pointing out, like, and you did in your presentation, is these pointed diminishing returns. We can get 95% of the benefit we're looking for with X, and you can get that last 5 with Y, but Y is going to make the price tag look like we shouldn't do anything at all. And so want to be sensitive to those pieces and making sure that we're doing as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And then I guess my last comment is to, what we heard from the public is that this is going to cost money. That's the idea. And this is important. And this is where municipalities need to be spending their money. This is too big of an issue for the planet not to be prioritizing this in our budgets and having some pain points as we do go through this process. It's gonna cost money, and that's okay. We need to spend this money, and hopefully as this year and next year continue, we'll have a better sense of the money we have, because we can't bankrupt ourselves either while going through it. So a lot of great stuff. I really love the presentation, love the direction that staff's taken and that council's taken, the public's taken. We all seem to be marching in the same direction, and really excited to see this keep moving forward and make some really hard decisions around final direction. So thanks so much for the presentation.
Thank you. I'm going to take the opportunity to jump in. I know some of you would like to make comments as well. I want to thank the team for this work. I think the body of work is terrific at this point in time, and I think some of the comments I made when we kicked this off, which you're well aware of, is I was talking about life cycle. I was talking about not wanting to have release 1.0 of a heat pump or whatever it might be. I appreciate some of the comments made by public. We want to have utility systems in these buildings that reduce our reliance upon burning greenhouse gases and creating greenhouse gases. And so looking at life cycle costs, if it takes us out to 2035, that may be what it is. I don't know what we're going to come back with. It's a combination of life cycle, useful life, and ability to finance it. But the reality is the mechanical systems of the building do need to be addressed at the end of their life. And so as much as we can match that up, you know, even the better. But I really do like the criteria across the facilities. It's interesting when I look at the, you know, sort of the mapping of all the facilities that we're talking about. Where will we end up saying where we start? And, you know, we talked about the rec center and the mechanicals there. Maybe there's things we can do in the short term, but replacing systems we put in 2018 probably isn't as critical as doing systems that were put in the 1980s in other buildings or things like that. So one of the questions I was going to ask, and I asked last time, and you answered already, though, was really talking about present value of the cost of this. Nominal dollars don't mean anything. And, you know, I put in solar panels 10 years ago, and I tried to do a present value, and, you know, it's startlingly different than using nominal dollars. So I appreciate that being an aspect to it. But, you know, the purpose tonight really is an update. I really appreciate the update. I believe the direction we're going is you are going. Well, I'm not going to take credit for your work, but the direction you're going, and I look forward to the final report. I look forward to saying what can we do and what is the right time frame, and, you know, the policies around that, and, you know, trying to understand what some of these funding options might be, and different ways of looking at it. So thank you very much. I think the Mayor Pro Tem has some comments as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. I also appreciate all the work that's been put into this. It's going in exactly the right direction. I would like to see, I agree with the other comments that replacing equipment before the end of life is probably not the most environmentally smart thing to do, financially or because of the materials that went into building it in the first place. I would like to know, though, based on my former comment, how feasible it would be to get as many grants as possible to be generating our own electricity to power these things that are all going to be electric. The reason being, I don't want to electrify a building and then have the electricity being produced by coal or gas. And so where is that balance, and how can we best do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, you mentioned powering an electrified system with coal. One of the added benefits of a hybrid system is that when that gas needs to kick on is when the grid would be dirtiest and running with the most coal. So while natural gas is not better than renewable energy, it is better than coal. So it does speak to what you're talking about. As far as the renewables question, I think with Leslie mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, which really does change the equation financially for public entities. So we have the opportunity to have more renewables than we would have in the past from a financial perspective. So we are looking at that pretty closely, particularly on the next set of buildings, which includes the water treatment plants. And there's potentially some area there where we can install additional renewables. Another factor to that is that the city acquires its electricity through Excel via a renewable subscription program. So the city subscribes to it's called Renewable Connect and WindSource. And so we will continue to do that. And part of our evaluation is in really ranking the costs of different levels of renewable energy. So in the summary document, we have the cost per unit of electricity for energy efficiency and load reduction, for city-owned renewables, for a subscription program to pay for renewables. So we are really looking at a holistic, we're taking a holistic view to that exact question and saying how, and also how does that equation change as Excel adds more renewable energy to their mix and the city needs to acquire less subscription renewable energy. There is a graphic in the progress narrative showing from now until, I think it goes out till 2040 or 2050, what that equation looks like. So we are definitely including that.
That'll be in addition to the graph that Councilman
Yep, this
Hamilton
graph
asked.
already, yeah, this graph already exists. So yeah, yep.
Good, another page.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we do love graphs, so there will be plenty of graphs, don't worry.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Hefner?
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for the really detailed presentation. I agree with many of the comments so far, in particular that I'm looking forward to seeing in the next phase, sort of the prioritization and the thing that I'm in particular looking for is sort of what's the low-hanging fruit in terms of which options are either going to be saving the people of Louisville money over a certain payback period or at least breaking even, and sort of which are the more aggressive spendy options so that we can have a thoughtful discussion around that. I am very sensitive to Councilor Dickinson's point that I don't envy your job of having to model and forecast which grants we're going to get and what's going to be the price of natural gas in the future and what's the weather going to be. I mean, there's a lot of variables, right? And I saw we have a slide on weather sensitivity, and I hope you're sort of thinking through all of that, and you know, maybe we see a range of forecasts or something like that. But it seems to me that we should really be trying to maximize sort of value per dollar that we're spending on this after federal grants, right? If there's a couple $1 million in federal grants available, that might really change the math on a lot of these projects. So I'm looking forward to seeing the details on that, and thanks for all the good work.
Thank you. Councilor Most?
Yeah, thank you. I may need staff to chime in on this one too. I guess two things for me. One is trying to understand how this process and our plan for decarbonization or decarbonizing, that's the word I'm looking for, thank you. Our municipal buildings is consistent with the new 2021 commercial codes that we passed. And then also, one of the things for me that I really want to see is that in this process, lots of charts and graphs, but I mean, just basically trying to use our own process of decarbonization as a model for other commercial entities. So the things that we learn about process and about where the cost benefit trade-offs are and how to apply for county, state, federal money, all of those things that we're making sure that we're collecting that in a way that we can then provide, you know, at the very least models and certainly ultimately assistance for our commercial business entities in the community that want to follow suit. So I think it's great in a way that we're guinea pigs on this, because basically we're putting our money hopefully where our mouths are in terms of promoting this, and then using this as an opportunity to really say, hey, look, here's how you do it. Here's the, you know, as Councilmember Hoffner said, where do we get the biggest bang for the buck? Like, where do we really put our money? How do we do that? And also Councilor Dickinson. And so that, I think, provides a great framework. So I just want to make sure, as, you know, city staff works with you guys, that we are thinking about that and how we can convert that into communications that we can then use to help our community.
Thank you. Any last councilor comments before I do a little wrap up? No? So I want to thank the team. You know, everybody on the team, all the work you've done, the body of knowledge at this point is something that's very encouraging. And some of the things that we said at the beginning, you've integrated in your thinking. We want to do this in a way that makes sense, and I think you've heard that. But we want to reduce greenhouse gases for the city facilities in as much as we can with the resources we have. So with that, thank you very much, and we look forward to the next phase.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
But
Thank you.
All right, the next item of business, regular business B, ordinance number 1852, series 2023, an ordinance amending chapter 5.08 of the Louisville Municipal Code regarding liquor tastings, and this is the second reading. In public hearing, it was advertised in the Daily Camera on March 12th, 2023. Are there any disclosures on this item? Seeing none, I'll open the public hearing, and we'll start with a staff presentation. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Good evening, Council. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jenny Klein, Deputy City Clerk and Secretary to the Local Licensing Authority. As you know, voters passed Proposition 125 last November, which allowed those establishments that only sold beer to sell wine starting March 1st of this year. Along with that ability to sell wine, they were also granted permission to have tastings in their establishment. Currently, the Louisville Municipal Code is very specific in allowing tastings only in retail liquor stores. So the ordinance before you this evening will modify the code to allow fermented malt beverage and wine retailers and liquor licensed drugstores to conduct tastings as well. This change will align the municipal code with state law. The local licensing authority recommends updating the code to allow tastings for these additional establishments. Also, before you this evening, is a review of the city rules regarding tastings. The current city rules were adopted in 2004 and not modified when the state updated their guidelines. Council may maintain the current rules, amend rules to align with the state, or amend the rules in any other way as long as they aren't more permissive than the state rules. The local licensing authority has taken no position regarding the tasting rules and will support any changes that council deems necessary. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions on the presentation? Councilor Hefner?
Yeah, could you just help us understand sort of what the impetus is for the change? Is this being requested by licensees or a trade group, or sort of where is this coming from?
It's kind of a preemptive strike, if you will. I anticipate that King Soopers and probably Safeway will request a tasting license. So far they haven't, but I know they're doing it in other municipalities, so I think we're just trying to get ahead of the ask here.
Thank you.
I had a quick question. On the graphic or the schedule up, did the current city guidelines, did that mirror previous state guidelines, or are those different?
It mirrored the state guidelines in 2004. I believe the state changed their guidelines when the rule to allow liquor stores to stay open on Sundays was changed, but the city did not update their guidelines at that time, which is why we're still
Okay.
with the old ones.
Thank you. Any other questions before we go to public comment? All right, thank you. So we're going to go to public comment on this item. There's going to be 2 opportunities to do public comment because this is an ordinance. So this will be the first round of public comments. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Please tell us your name and if you're a Louisville resident. Is there anybody on Zoom who wishes to comment on this? Seeing none, we'll see if anybody in the room wishes to comment on this. All right, well, that's the first round of public comment, so we'll go to... That was easy. That's very easy. Any council comments or discussion? Councilor Most?
It seems like it would make sense for us to be consistent with the state rules. I don't think we want to have, penalize businesses in our community to set them to a higher standard if those standards seemed reasonable to the state. I don't have any objection to aligning ourselves with the state rules.
Thank you. I actually have exactly the same comment. Aligning with state rules makes perfect sense in this case. Anybody else want to make a comment? You ready for the second round of public comment?
I'm ready.
All right. Second round of public comment. We'll start in the room. No? Anybody on Zoom? All right. We'll come back to the last round of council discussion. Any discussion?
I would
Councilor Hefner?
just agree with those two previous comments. I think we should align with the state on both decision points.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Fahey?
I will agree with the three comments that have been made now. I also think that it makes sense to align with state regulations.
Councilor Lay?
So let me just make sure I understand ordinance 1852. Does the language in fact align with the state rules or not? Can you talk louder, please? Yes.
Councilmember, we did not modify the ordinance regarding the tasting rolls, as we did not know what you all would want to do.
Okay.
So you would need to make an amendment this evening to change that.
Okay. Therefore, are you ready for?
You can make a motion at any time.
Yes, I move passage of ordinance number 1852, amended to align directly with state maximums concerning tasting hours, which, as I understand it, would run from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. A limit of days per year would move from 104 days per year to no more than 156 days per year, and I believe would eliminate both the requirements or both the limitations, no more than 4 of 6 days from Monday to Saturday and no tastings on Sundays. Those two would be eliminated.
Is that sufficient of a motion? Great.
Sounds great.
I'll second.
Thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing because it seems like we're getting close to a vote here. Is everybody ready to vote? We have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Most?
Yes.
Councilmember Hefner?
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Mayor Maloney?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Fahey?
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item is regular business C, discussion direction, development of a request for proposal for the 2024 through 2029 residential solid waste hauling contract, and we have the director with us. So, it's your show.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Every 5 years, I get to talk trash to you, and you get to talk trash to me. What's not to like about that? So some of you have been through this process before that we're about to talk about, and then some of you, this is new. And so just to try to get everybody on the same page for what we'll be dealing with this year, just give you a little background. But overall, our goal from Solid Waste for Louisville is to enable our residents to dispose of their solid waste in a convenient, environmentally responsible, and a cost-effective manner. Typically, they put priority, our residents, on convenience and cost, right? And then our job is to make sure that's happening in an environmentally responsible way. What's it? Oh, sorry. What's going on here? Oh, is that what's going on? close PowerPoint.
I need to make sure. How did Kayla do that? It's on the wrong screen is the problem. Which one's yours?
I am PDF. You have to run right there.
Just pull it over. It's on the second screen.
Just
there you go.
There we go. Fantastic. Thank you, Meredith. Okay. All right. So, as I was saying, enable our residents to dispose of their solid waste in a convenient, environmentally responsible, cost-effective manner. This is one of the biggest contracts the city manages. It's about $7 million over 5 years, so that's a lot of money. And that money is a pass-through through the city to the residents. That's not something that the city charges residents. Our vendor charges us, and then we charge the residents. So just the background is this program started in 2009, and from 2009 to 19, we had one vendor, and we switched in 2019 to another vendor. But overall, the program was created to minimize the destruction on the streets. These are heavy trucks, particularly in cul-de-sacs where they're turning around and whatnot. Really tears up the pavement. Also added the ability to incentivize recycling at that time and offer composting as a service. This is kind of how everything has progressed over time. Pre-2009, you had multiple contractors around the city, maybe providing service on multiple days. They may have had recycler compost opportunities, they may not. When the city started its program, it started with what we call an increment and a pay-as-you-throw system. So a pay-as-you-throw system works in the fact that you start with a smaller bin size and you go to a larger bin size, you pay more. So we start out with what's called an 80% increment. That means on, say, a $10 bin, your next size up will be 80% more. So your next up, your second largest bin would be $18 versus 10, okay? And also in that time, like I said, we included the recycling, and you could get up to a 96-gallon bin at that time included. Compost was offered, but it was offered through an a la carte service, and it was also on an incremental kind of, you paid more for the bigger bin. We went with that over time, and also we were on a Thursday schedule for the entire city. So over time, we did these RFPs every 5 years, and in 2018, when we started to review what we wanted to do for the RFP, through a subcommittee of the city council, which at that point was a utility committee, we discussed the opportunities of how can we divert more waste. And so what we talked about is doing a 100% increment on the trash cost. So a $10 bin to go to the next size would then be $20. And then we also discussed that, hey, we really would like to have more people compost. So instead of charging them more for a bigger bin, let's put that in the cost of the trash. So that cost of the recycle and that cost of that compost are included in the cost of that trash. Another change that took place in 2019 as we changed vendors was we went from a Thursday service to a Tuesday through Friday service. What happens for the 24 to 29 contract is what we're going to discuss today. This is just a general overview of the city, and you can kind of see by the green dots where we service customers with the programs, and then there are HOAs within the city which by ordinance can opt out if they provide their own trash service. Opt-out HOAs have to have everyone involved in their program. They do have to provide recycling. Currently, they do not have to provide compost. This is just illustrative in purpose. The dots aren't perfect, but you can see the general trends. So Republic Services was our successful vendor in 2019. We just did a citywide customer service survey to see how they're doing. In general, what that said is Republic is reliable, but struggles with customer service. I think as a staff that manages that, we know that. Those have been some challenges that we've experienced with Republic. But we did do the survey just to see where things stand, and that's in this packet. I'm not going to go into the survey in detail. If you have questions about it, we can go there, but I'm just trying to stay at a high level today. These are the general results, historical results of our surveys over time. So in 2012, the program had been going on for about 3 years. You can see there's a 90% satisfaction rate. We're using Western Disposal there. Get to 2020, still got a decent satisfaction rate there, 82%. And now in 2023, for that higher level of satisfaction, we're down to 66%. So you could say those trends aren't going well. And so you can decide what value you place on that as we move forward with this, and what value you'll place on that as we make a consideration of whoever bids this contract. What I will tell you is this type of bidding situation for trash for our services, we typically don't get 5 to 10 bidders. You get 1, 2, 3 if you're lucky. So this isn't an abundance here, it's a scarcity, and we have to be very careful about how we work through this. This is just the waste that we divert that bounces around over the years. Recycling's been trending down over the years as manufacturers get really good at making their packaging much less, less thickness to the plastics, more optimization just in packaging. Compost bounces around. You can see it jumped up in 2020, and I'll talk about that a little bit here in a graph, but overall you can see our diversion rate bounces in the 40%. This is for just the solid waste program through Republic Services. This doesn't include our leaf drop-off tonnage, metal recycling tonnage, and other things we do throughout the city, such as a hazardous materials facility fee that we charge where our residents can go to the Boulder County facilities. So on the graph, you can see overall tonnage has gone down over the years, and when we changed over to the 100% increment in 2019, that brought tonnage down. The recycling's been trending off. The compost, you might say, hey, what's going on there? In 2020, COVID hit, we had to make some budget cuts. So the city got rid of the leaf drop-off facility in the fall, and we get a decent amount of tonnage that goes there in the fall. And so the composting usage for the Republic tonnage increased. We brought that program back in 2022, so things tailed off. Composting is also, it's been impacted slightly by some of the accounts that have not rebuilt from the Marshall fire. And then it's also just dependent on whether we're in a really wet year or a drought year and how much things are growing. A lot of your compost tonnage is your yard waste. So what affects your pricing? We've talked about the increment, the blue line. These are percentages of the different sizes of the bins by year. And then the blue line is where we changed over how we charge for our rates with the 100% increment and embedding the compost. You can see by going to the 100% increment that we had more people shift over to the smaller trash bins in 21 and 23, 49% and 48% up there. With the recycling, you can see that more people have moved to the larger bins for recycling. And then finally, you can see the results in the compost where we built the cost of the compost in, so it's included in your price to get that larger bin, and therefore people shifted up. There's some percentage of the city that just doesn't have a recycle bin or doesn't have a compost bin. There's one account that has no bins. So, I mean, net zero waste right there, right?
Where are they putting it?
I don't speculate there.
Wait, let's let him finish his presentation.
We're talking trash. So things that affect your pricing in the bid is if you want service on one day of the week, that's going to require more labor and more trucks to do it all in one day than if you spread it out over multiple days. Things in our contract that can impact cost is the type of index we use to do our contract increases yearly. So over time, we've moved that around. We use the All Urban Consumers Index for a little bit. And then in our latest contract, we use the Denver Aurora Lakewood Index. And then even in this past year, Republic approached us and said, hey, current inflation is really high, but the water sewer trash index that's out there, which we typically use with a lot of customers, has stayed pretty stable. So they actually allowed us to move over that index. So at that point in time last year, the Denver Aurora Lakewood was at 8.58%, and the water sewer trash was at 4.42%. So that contract increase was actually less. So what indexes we choose in our contract can also impact how that cost compounds yearly. It has moved around, as you can see, different periods in time. I think we've been, I'd like to say we've been good, but we've been lucky. We've had the right index at the right time for the cheapest increases each year. But looking forward, we might just want to talk about, do we think that the consumer price indexes are going to bounce around a lot? We want something more stable. So we might want to just go with the water sewer index, trash index. That could add up more over time as it has historically. Or we could just say, hey, we want to stick with our Denver Aurora Lakewood consumer price index. Just some things to consider. These are key points that are in our contract. I've attached our contracts. You can read through it if you're into that, but these are the key things you would pull out. Is our term is 5 years. Our last bid, we did bid 10 years, and we looked at those differences and decided we like the flexibility of 5 years. Again, I just talked on the consumer price indexes, communications expectations, customer service, having local call center are things that we've written into our contracts. The customer service area has been a struggle with Republic because they have abided by their contract terms off and on. They actually had a breach of contract because Republic has local call center, but they also have a national call center. And so by their call center metrics, if someone calls and doesn't get to a local call center, they want that to go to a national call center. And when too many calls come into the local call center and go to the national call center, that's where a lot of confusion happens. And that's where we get a lot of unhappy customers. So that's been a challenge with Republic. Fleet type, right now we have natural gas, all natural gas trucks. That's what we put in our bids last time. Another thing we could consider is bidding all electric fleet and seeing what that price looks like. So you can do that. We can do different add alternates and say, hey, bid us for natural gas and bid us for electric. We can see what the price looks like, decide where the value lies for us, or if the technology is even available in our region. You'll get things like additional services. With Republic right now, we have the spring and fall leaf and branch pickup that's curbside. You get a free quarterly bulk item pickup, but then we also do a big bulk item pickup program in the fall. Those things, none of these things are game changers, but they are feel-good things for your residents. Like a typical trash tonnage in a given month would be like 300 tons. One bulk pickup per year picks up about 40 to 50 tons. Your spring and leaf pickup picks up about 30 to 40 tons between both events in the year. So again, these aren't game changers. 1 month of compost is 150 tons. So they're like small pieces but people like these services. So you'll see what additional services these providers may have to offer. Again, schedule we talked on 1 day versus multi-day. And then another thing we may want to talk about is, do you want recycle every week instead of every 2 weeks? Or do you want compost every week instead of every 2 weeks? The city at one point in time, it might have been around 2015, did a question about would you like compost weekly? There was not a great response to that. With the days of online shopping though, maybe recycling is something that people want to see more for their cardboard. So just if you had to go through your own mock decision today to get you ready to think about how to do this, these are results from 2019. But we worked with the utility committee at that time, and we created our selection criteria. And we said, this is how we'll weight things over 100-point criteria. So as you can see, we're heavily weighted on pricing at 70 points or 70%. Then we had services, so those would be those additional services I touched on, like the bulk item pickup and the leaf drop stuff. The RFP quality, we always feel like the quality of an RFP we get and how they present themselves is also an indicator of how they'll present to our community. References, we do call references of everybody. They'll give us, hey, call these communities. They'll tell you how our service was. We did do that with Republic. We got really good references back on Republic. It seems like kind of the services they're providing are a little different than what the references had provided. I don't know why, but Schedule, we talked about that. Equipment, we talked about that. So maybe in the case of this bid, if you ask for electric fleet and one provider can provide electric and one can't, maybe there's a difference of scoring there. And then just the interview. We bring them in, we interview them in person, we have them talk about, who are going to be our customer reps, who's our manager for the account, all those types of things, and how do we feel about that. You add all those things up, you get a score. It's generally going to be pretty tight. Every time we do this bid process, it's pretty tight. So it won't be an easy decision once it gets to city council. We will do our best as staff to give you a recommendation based off pros and cons and just a neutral viewpoint of what we see. These were the real results from the last one. So it was, the spread there was really on price in the last bid. Price was the biggest differentiator. The last time we had to make this decision, Western and Republic bid this, and we wanted to do the embedded, which at that time was including the compost. A la carte was sticking with our current programs. But roughly 88% of our customers in the Republic bid were going to see up to a $4 savings or a break even. And 12% we're going to see a cost increase. But there was just a significant cost difference on a monthly bill for many of our customers, a cost savings. And so again, you're trying, as you make these decisions, to weigh how much do I want to pay more for the best customer service possible versus how much do I want to provide the best value to all my residents. You will find this is a very passionate topic. There's many ways to touch the soul of a city, and trash is one of them, I can tell you that. Again, these are value-added services, so this is what was in the bids from Republic and Western at that time. I won't go into all of these, but these are things that people will get attached to, and then they will attach to. I love that service they provided. You switch providers, now we don't have it. I'm just heartbroken. So these are real things that are important to people. They look forward to these services, and so they are something to consider. So what I want to know tonight is, what do you want out of the 23-24 process to look like for you, so that you can have a level of comfort when you make a decision, that we've gotten all the information you want, we've evaluated all the different pieces of the program, or bid all the different types of alternates you might want to see. My viewpoint of how this will go, so you know that you have time to deal with it, is we'll talk 2 or 3 more times and get this right for you. There's no bad ideas, there's no bad questions. Then we'll advertise this RFP in Q3 of this year, and then that'll come in for us, and we'll kind of go through and vet everything, make sure everyone provided all the information they were supposed to provide us. We'll do any clarifications in the RFP if there's any erroneous information, and then we'll want to award a contract in Q4. And so we'll talk about how we want to make that selection and award that contract. If we don't make a change in vendors, it's pretty easy. We just keep doing what we're doing. If we do make a change in vendors, and that's a pretty big process, we'll do a big notification. It takes about 6 months. We'll do a notification out to all our customers. Hey, this is a decision that's been made. This is when this is going to come. And then there's generally an intro process with the new vendor. And there's a process with the new vendor where they reach out to our residents and say, what type of bins would you like for your first, when we hand them out to you? What sizes do you want? We got to do address validations. And then that transition happens where we actually hand out new bins from the new vendor and pull in the old bins. I think most of you have been through this. It's a lovely thing to go through. And then we start the new contract in September of 24. So the biggest thing when we start this is, as we talk about this, do you want to change any of the selection criteria that we had discussed previously 5 years ago? Weight things differently, add things. So I'll stop there and just kind of see what you think.
Thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions, clarification on the presentation? And then we'll go to public comment, and then we'll come back and ask all the tough questions and have a good discussion. Any clarifications? Yes, Councilor Hamilton.
Thank you. Just like concrete, You're blowing my mind. I never thought I would be so interested in this
Exciting
topic.
stuff.
But I truly am. I mean, it's fascinating to me. It's fascinating to me. So I have a question for you specifically regarding, looks like it's page 449, historical trash collection survey results.
I have the PDF. Now I'm gonna fight with the computer. You want to go to the survey? I'm not in the whole packet. I just have my one.
Oh, that's okay.
It's the.
It's the color
The
rainbow.
color coded with the
Chart.
survey.
Yeah.
Okay.
Survey information.
That shows the decrease from 90% to 66% satisfaction. So while you're pulling that up, I'll ask my question. I think it's natural when we see numbers.
Oh, mine. Got it. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Good. Keep going. I think it's natural for one, when we see numbers presented in this way, to try to identify trends. There you go. Yep. When I was looking further in the packet, it looks like for 2023, the N was 1,647 participants. So two questions. One, were the surveys the same over those 3 years, or were there different questions asked?
It's a great question about the questions. Yes, there were different questions asked, and they were asked with different categories. And so I did my best to align those things. That's why you see the broad color coding.
Yep.
And I don't know the end values on the 2012 and 2020, but we could get those.
Yeah.
They all were statistically valid surveys. The 2012 and 2020 were from the overall citizen survey response, and then the 23 was just from the city trash customer survey satisfaction.
Okay, so I think the ends would be helpful. So am I identifying trends where there was only 100 people filled it out in 2012, and that's why it was really good, and now we have 1,600 people filling it out? Also, if we can extract the customer satisfaction questions, that seems to be the crux of the issue here, as far as user experience goes. I think that trend, or however you can pull a trend for us over time, would be really useful. Let's see here. Yeah, that was my only clarifying question. Do you have any questions for me? Clarifying questions?
My question's about your questions about the questions, not right now.
Okay, you know where to reach me.
But that was a really nice question. You know,
No more questions.
no, I have a question. So, I mean, we talk about tonnage. Is tonnage relevant at this point? I mean, as you noted, 2020, people started ordering a lot more stuff online. I see a lot more Amazon trucks in my neighborhood. So it's, and even Amazon has switched from boxes, now they're doing more bags. So does the tonnage mean anything to us as far as this decision?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, it's just showing you trends. I think you want to provide a trash bin, you want to provide a recycle bin, you want to provide a compost bin. Now, if you want to get into conversations about what people can or cannot put into each of those bins, you can do that, but that's not part of this contract. So for example, all this cardboard, a lot of it may go into the trash bin. Some cities have said you can't put cardboard in the trash, must be recycled. That's where the tonnage would come in, but not
Okay.
for this contract.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem Fahey?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One, in this survey, in the years, were there differences in the provider or the services that the provider provided that would impact satisfaction?
Yes, 2012 and 20 were Western Disposal. 2023, or I'm sorry, 20 and 23 were Republic. 2012 was Western. You know, you had the 100% increase increment, so cost would be higher than the previous contract. Compost, you know, was optional at the time, and now it's built into a cost. So those could be things.
Okay. And then, do you think that there's going to be another impact on compost slash recycle with the new A1 requirements of not recycling paper products or anything?
Yeah, I think those dynamics have changed for now and they're stable, how they're going to work. So what all the PR you've seen around that is not going to change for the worse, should not change for the worse. And I just think there's a lot of interest regionally about that conversation about how to make that better. So if anything, composting should get better with time.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for the deputy city manager, who probably remembers when we did that, because the 2012 and the 2020 were the city survey. And do you know what time of the year that was done?
So I was actually just looking that up. In my records, it looks like we completed the questions for the survey and launched it in the spring. So I think we did it we finalized the questions in February, and I think we did it in maybe sort of March, April, May-ish. So I think it was in those
Okay.
spring months.
All right, so Director, if I sync this up, so we started the Republic service in September of 2019.
Yes.
And the survey then was, let's just call it April of 2020. And the only thing I'm going to point out here is, so that was a city survey of all of the services, which was different really than the survey that was done in 2023, which we asked you to do. But they're a little bit different, and we're going to get different kind of numbers there. Thank you. We're going to take public comment now. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Councilor Dickinson.
Thank you. Yeah, really, really interesting. I think the comment I want to make about the survey, and it's just that I would assume if we do a survey about all things in 2012, and one of the questions about trash, you're getting the community answering all the questions, including the trash question. Same thing happens in 2020, and then in 2023 you have a survey about trash. Who's gonna respond to that survey, right? My guess is people who are more engaged with the trash pickup are more likely to answer that survey because it's really fun to complain. And so I think it's very interesting because again in 2020, between when we switched services and that survey, I received probably as many emails about trash pickup and complaints about trash pickup as I received about anything else. To your point, Kurt, people care about this. And so I was getting dozens of emails about the transition and how frustrated people were, and to only see the satisfaction drop 8% is in some ways surprising. Then you have a survey that's just about trash and it looks way worse, doesn't actually super surprising. So I'm curious how much we can rely on these big numbers as being, really representative of people's opinion. So that was just, I wasn't thinking about talking about that, but Barbara, thanks for bringing that up because I think the way the surveys are done and exactly who's responding and all that certainly matters. The question I did have is, Kurt, do you have built into the system in any way in the decision-making process the cost of transition, that both time and real cost? I mean, I think one of the reasons the switch from Western to Republic was so rough is because it was a switch, right? I mean, I had people even just complaining about the color of the bins, which, 2 years later, 3 years later, no one's calling me to complain about the color of the trash bin. That doesn't mean they love it, but they're not talking about it. So transition is tough, and having to engage and say how many bins you want, all these things, going through transition is a negative typically. Now, again, with all the feedback we got, people might be very excited about a transition again. But is that built in at all? I mean, you're talking about a 6-month process and outreach and all that stuff. I know some of that's just on the provider and they're going to do a lot of that work themselves and maybe not time for us, but is that built into the model at all? the cost of transitioning?
The cost of transition is built into the cost of their bids. And so if we look at the slide with the bid prices before, it really doesn't affect, I mean, these haulers bid on these jobs across the region and the transitions happen. So it's a business model cost for them that I think is built in. For us, we probably had $5,000 to $15,000 in our own staff labor, and we did some events where we went around town and did neighborhood meetings with Sweet Cow, I think. So yeah, there is some cost on a $7 million contract. I'd say it's not a decision maker, the transition impact. It's the inconvenience to every single resident to turn in a bin, take a survey, get a new bin, get used to somebody else. I think it's just the transition inconvenience on the just your neighbors.
Yeah, I guess that's just, we can talk about it more as we move forward, but when you get complaints like, I liked my trash pickup day, and now I'm so upset we switched Republic because they switched my day, are we going to get the same feedback when you switch back to a different company? Like, oh, good, my day's back to what it was. Like, I can switch my day again. And so I guess there's the actual cost and then the mental cost of transition, right? Of, just keeping things the same is nice for people, right? And any transition costs something, whether it's emotional or monetary. So anyways, I think it's an important piece to have in the bigger puzzle. I don't think it necessarily makes the decision, but it should be an element of our decision is the quote unquote cost of transition. So I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. One more comment from Councilor Hamilton, and then we're going to go to public comment.
I don't know if this is a question you can answer or someone else in the room, but what's the current estimate of how many residents we have living in Louisville at this point in time?
Probably around 20,000, yeah.
20,000. Okay. So it's about 1,650 responded. So it's about 8% of the population responded to this survey.
Yeah, the firm that we worked with said this was a really great turnout, and they felt really good about the statistical validity and what they heard. This was a very strong survey. And if, as part of these ongoing conversations, if the survey results are this critical, we could have them come at the next discussion and really dive into these results to help you all understand that better. If that helps, well, for you.
Yeah, I don't know if necessarily diving deep into it. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around big picture. How does this represent the larger community, and how does this stack against the other ones as far as trends go? And you've, for the most part, addressed that tonight for me.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that.
I think a little clarification there. I think it probably needs to be the numerator needs to be the number of residences rather than the number of residents. So there's about 8,000 homes. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we have about 5,200 accounts. It's going to be 5,200. That's going to be your denominator.
Right. So the response rate for that, if you're trying to compare that to number of homes, that's probably 4 times that number.
Yep. Okay.
So, all right, we're gonna go to public comment, and then we'll bring you back for an interrogation if that's okay. All right. Once again, Joshua Cooperman.
Right. Josh Cooperman, I live at 216 Griffith Street. So one of my principal concerns is that we make all efforts to craft a waste disposal contract that prioritizes and incentivizes waste reduction and diversion. And of course, we should make other efforts to reduce and divert waste beyond this contract. So I'd like to offer a few suggestions about how we might achieve that. The first 3 are not my own. They come from fellow resident Laura Leves Catalano. She suggests that we could ask the haulers to explain how they verify that recyclable loads are taken to be recycled and compostable loads are taken to be composted instead of being landfilled. She also suggests that we ask haulers to explain how they aim to prevent, reduce, and deal with contamination in recycling and composting streams. And then she also suggests that we include a provision in the contract to allow HOAs and multifamily residences to opt in, at least the ones that do not currently, are not currently part of the contract. She also suggests, and I like this idea as well, I've advocated for it before, is that we mandate that the HOAs and multifamily residences which are not in the contract provide composting, or that we require them to opt into the city's contract. And I would like to add to that, eventually, I think we should also mandate that commercial entities engage in recycling and composting. And then two other suggestions. One is that we increase the pay-as-you-throw incentive to more than 100%. I would like to add that I, maybe not disinterested, I mean, I have the smallest bin, so it wouldn't affect me, but at least by the numbers, it seemed like increasing that incentive, right, charging more for a larger bin seemed to have some effect on reducing the amount of waste. And then the other thing I might suggest is that we decrease the frequency of trash pickup. I personally could go several months before filling up my small bin. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we have Judy Kern.
Hi, I'm Judy Kern. Was at 955 Eldorado Lane in Louisville. The part of the Cornerstone Marshall unfortunately affected our homes. This is a Marshall-related fire question. Do we have any idea when we're receiving the bids, when the companies are expecting to be able to return service as people are reoccupying the homes over the course of the next couple of years? And then a follow-up question would be, let's say that service is based on 50% occupancy, for example. How will they navigate the continued builds, and how will people put their trash out? I think this probably should be a factor for who's bidding, given that there's hundreds of affected homes in Louisville. And will there be an affected cost? So if they don't service neighborhoods, let's say for the first 6 months of the year, will they give us a discount? Because it's a lot less residents that they have to pick up from. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Sherry.
Sherry Summer, 910 South Palisade Court. When this came up in 2019, I'm really tired, I remember thinking, I think it's very important to stick with a local trash hauler, and I made that comment. And then the council decided more on price, and I thought, I think that's kind of a mistake, and oh my gosh. Like, who knew? I mean, I love saying hello to my trash man, and I guess everybody else does too. So I really want to encourage you to think strongly about contracting with Western again. I think, in my opinion, I think you should ignore the survey completely, because we've already seen what people think. I mean, people really like Western. I'll tell you why I like them. They're always super friendly. You've never had to worry about when things were. It just kind of flowed in your life. And I don't really keep a lot of track of what's supposed to happen, but it always happened correctly with Western. I think we need to change the sub-program statement. It mentions convenience, cost, and environmental responsibility. I think we should say something about local providers, because that means something to people. You feel like, oh, our city is supporting people who have families, they're nice people, and we're like interconnected with other people, not just, oh, we're saving money. I remember talking to former council member Stoltzman at the time, and she said, you know, people often complain when prices are raised, but this time we made a mistake. We really should have thought more about the emotional connection to your trash man. It's kind of weird, but true. I just have a question about 1 day versus multiple days, if that has benefits to the city. I know having multiple trash haulers wears out the roads, but I don't understand that part. I think the sort of the little perks from Republic are confusing. I have trouble, I don't know, I just like my trash picked up. I don't need all these other things to think about. That's just me. Yeah, so I really hope that we go back to Western and you can make a lot of people happy. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room? Yes, sir. Just state your name and
I'm Dave Murray, 569 West Arrowhead Street. And I noticed in the presentation that there's only 2 bidders last time, and that you anticipate that it's going to be the same thing this time. And I'm wondering what concerns you might have that the bidders would be colluding and splitting the area contracts among themselves at a higher than competitive price. In other words, they both bid high on Lafayette, one guy gets Lafayette, one guy gets Louisville. Is that a concern?
So, okay, thank you. Yep. He'll address that when he comes back up. Any other public comment? All right, we'll go to Zoom and see if anybody on Zoom would like to make comments. All right, seeing none, we will come back to council for any discussion. Councilor Most?
So anecdotally, I don't ever remember anybody talking about trash when Western Disposal was collecting our trash. And it seems like a lot of people are talking about trash since Republic started collecting it. I know my own personal experience is that I don't even remember thinking about it, and I know there, I can probably count the number of times in the last few years when I've had to call them. I don't ever remember calling Western except to pick up a bulk item. And I've definitely called Republic, my own personal experience. So I've talked to people that I know in my neighborhood, and that's sort of the sense I have. So when I look at those surveys results, it doesn't surprise me. It seems to reflect the anecdotal evidence, obviously not the basis of making a decision, and I'm just looking at the pricing, and it seems to me from the last bid round, I know people were talking about Republic being less expensive, and unless I'm reading this chart wrong, it really looks like the bulk of that savings was on the lower end where people had 32-gallon garbage, which is what I have. So those people really, with Republic, seem to save more. It doesn't look like, and in fact, on the higher end, it looks like they were paying more. So, we obviously have to consider price because it's an impact on our residents, but based on the kind of feedback that I've gotten formally from people and what I've seen in terms of complaints, I would say that definitely we need to look at customer service as a more significant factor if we're weighting these factors, because again, when garbage isn't a problem, no one's talking about it. If people are talking about it, then we got a problem. Thanks.
Councilor Lay?
I guess a couple of things. One, I appreciate Mr. Cooperman's referring to the email that we received from Laura Levesque Catalano. She had a couple of useful suggestions. I think the first 3 of those, which I think he mentioned among others, I thought were pretty good, because I think to some extent the qualitative information you get, maybe that's what it is, just qualitative information you get from them about how they're collecting and how they can reduce contamination is a huge one. I mean, Laura, I think, works for EcoCycle, so, which made her comments, I think, a little more meaningful to me, because that's a big issue. I know that it's a huge issue that I hear about, that, if stuff gets delivered and it's all contaminated, it ends up going to landfill anyway, and I hate hearing that. And I think knowing, what the practices are of the different bidders is definitely important. I remember the last go-around on this, and I remember how much weight, and I remember being a little bit more concerned about this, but the weight that was being placed on price above all else was, I think that was a mistake. I do think it was a mistake in process. I'm not sure overall that it was, I'm not going to sit here and say we shouldn't have picked Republic, but I think we put too little stock in some of the other considerations, being able, I think there is something about having a local company. I think we appreciate that in our own finance policies about who we buy from, and it's not quite the same because Western isn't a Louisville company, but I think it matters a little bit. I think how much, I don't know. Reliability is a huge issue. I do remember complaints under Western. I mean, it's not like one had complaints and one didn't. But I think the number of complaints, the frequency, and the kind of over and over reliability, and feeling kind of flummoxed about how to get satisfaction, and feeling a little bit disempowered. I think my sense of it is that that's something we need to address. However we do it. I mean, maybe whoever the contractors are. I mean, the whole point of this is not to be lining up in favor or against one or the other bidder. It's to try to create a process that's meaningful for people. And clearly, I think people are saying that there are considerations apart from price that matter to them. And I think that's something we ought to be responding to. So from that standpoint, those are a couple of the things I think that are important. I'm looking at the RFP criterion on your slide there. There's 100 points of pricing, additional services, RFP quality, references, pickup schedule, equipment quality, interview quality. One question I have, though, is, okay, so for the current contractor, we do have a lot of data here from our surveys. How do you evaluate that against, the other company? You can't really go back and say, well, here's what Western did for us before. Here were the survey results, right? I mean, I don't know how you, do that, how you properly weight those concerns. I mean, apart from just the kind of anecdotal stuff that you're hearing. Do you have a sense of how you are going to be evaluating that, or how you can?
I mean, I think this is tough to wrestle with something quantitative on a subjective feeling. I know the experience I've had with these two vendors, Western and Republic. What I don't know is, what is the value of $1 in our community? And if I knew how much more something was worth to our community, it would help me answer that question. In hindsight, maybe that was something we should have had on this customer satisfaction survey. Darn it. But I don't have that right now. So we can put more thought to it with you, but I don't think there's an obvious answer.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Yeah, I have one initial question is, so when we first went with Western, it was owned by a Louisville resident and his family. Is the business itself in Louisville? And so does the city get a benefit if Western is doing financially better, collecting taxes or permits or whatever?
Western is located in the city of Boulder, not
Okay.
in Louisville.
So we don't get any additional income from them? Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Hefner.
Yeah, thanks for the thoughtful presentation. I think the survey results on customer service are really important. And thinking about my experience, the main touch point you have, or at least that I have with the trash company, is A, when something goes wrong and you have to call, or B, if you need something special and you have to call. and it is really irritating if you have to have multiple phone calls with the trash company. You know, like making one call is something you have to live with. Making 3 or 4 calls is a nuisance. And I've certainly personally heard lots of complaints that I called for a special pickup and put it out Wednesday morning and nobody came to get it, and it's an old mattress, and now I have to bring it back in and put it out the next day and call again and arrange it, and that kind of thing. I wonder if we could consider in the RFP having folks propose some sort of incentive or disincentive or some sort of pricing mechanism based on a customer service score, right, where they're measuring the number of complaints, the frequency of complaints. I'm sure there's a sort of industry standard way of doing that, and they either get a penalty or maybe a bonus if they hit customer service. I mean, I don't know how else on a 5-year contract you get them to do it past the day the contract is awarded. I don't know what the mechanism would be. Looking through our existing contract, we have a lot of penalties, like if they put the recycling into the trash truck, they get fined $1,000. And so I wonder if there's a sort of similar idea we could consider hearing proposals about. I also think it was a really good idea to make sure we're having proposals address the phase-in as homes get rebuilt, and just making sure they've thought through, you know, what if it's only a handful of homes on the block at this point and more are coming online, and how will that be addressed? Because I do think that's, A, it's a collection problem, but B, it's a customer service problem in that probably it's nobody's first thought or priority as they're excited about getting back into their house to, oh, I've got to call the trash company and set that up. So to make sure we have a smooth process. And then I'm also sympathetic to the local provider. I mean, I don't know that I would give that a huge amount of weight, but there does seem to be potentially some value there. My kids like saying hi to the trash man, and if he beeps the horn, if we could weight that heavily.
Throw that in the metrics, yeah.
Thank you.
You can go next. I'm gonna go next, if that's okay. You know, I was part of this process because I was on the utility committee in 2019. You know, and as we look at the slide on page 457, pricing was very different. And yes, that was the differential, but if you look at the scoring on that, pricing was very different. And company Y actually, you know, picked up a lot of points in all the other categories. You know, I think that there's not really a point with that. It's just a sort of noting what's there. It's important that we as a council and from a policy perspective go out to bid on these large contracts. You come to us every year about paving, concrete, and everything else, and you know there's an RFP process for that. And I feel like we have a fiduciary duty as council, as a policy, to always do that. So we should go out to bid. It's the end of the contract, and that's our responsibility. The one thing you did note is the utility committee was involved. Are you expecting that the finance committee, since it's now combined with the utility committee, will play a role in this process?
Yes, I mean, that's kind of the input I want is how much does council want to be involved in this? Or are you good with that matrix and just get it out on the street type of thing, so.
Yeah, I think I would appreciate more discussion with the finance committee and their utility role. One of the things I want to note that some of the people have commented on is the HOAs. I actually live in Coal Creek Ranch, and you know that was one of the graphics you put up there. With the exception of Club Circle, all the rest of those homes in the south part of town are in Coal Creek Ranch. So there's really two things I want to say there. They currently still have Western Disposal. And it's interesting, when I've gotten calls and complaints, people said, oh, well, and you know, it was interesting because I would get calls from neighbors being on council, and it's like, okay, well, that's not Republic, that's Western. And there were times when my, you know, recycling bin wasn't completely empty because I jammed it too full. You know, some of this is our responsibility as homeowners. And so, you know, I heard complaints from residents but they were similar to the ones that we were experiencing. So they're not really very different. The other thing, just to note, is Coal Creek Ranch with Western Disposal does have an opt-in composting program, which I've been now part of for 3 years. So that is the largest HOA, I believe, in the city, and so they are doing that. You know, with regard to the RFP criteria, I think this is an opportunity to rethink it. You know, I think that what we had in 2019 was the right criteria, and now we need to say what's the right criteria for a contract we'll be doing in 2024, and it needs to be more heavily weighted on something that I think we all acknowledge, and you stated, it's really hard to measure what perception is today versus what perception might be if you change something or what it was previously. And that was why I was pointing out that the citizen survey in 2020 was after almost a whole year of service with Republic, came out very similar to the 2012 citizen survey. If we had done a survey in 2010, after we had forced everybody in the city to go with the same hauler, I think we would have had terrible results, in my opinion, because there were a lot of people unhappy that they were forced to go with the city program. So these things change over time. You know, and the other thing I want to, you know, just put out there, the pricing we have is a level of social engineering. I think you said it more elegant, but I'm going to say it more bluntly. We wanted to reward people who had smaller trash bins so that they were recycling and composting more. And so that was why we did the pricing the way we did, to really sort of change behavior. Now, you can say that was a good idea or a bad idea, but that is why it was done the way it was done. And so that's why a lot of people switched to the smallest trash bin, and we hope that they started doing more composting and recycling. But from my perspective, I think you've heard a lot of input. You know, in working with the council's finance committee, you know, we have 3 representatives, you know, including one that's virtually on the dais, that can help shape this, or at least a member of the finance committee can help shape this going forward. And if you want to bring it back, we can give another opinion. But, you know, I think pricing is important, and I think, you know, the perception of service is important. I do like all the add-ons, although I don't think that should really make a huge difference in who we select for this service. Councilor Hamilton.
Thank you. So, yeah, what I was going to discuss is the RFP criteria and using this as an opportunity to reimagine how we're going to weigh the different categories. For example, references. How much weight should we actually put in references? Are those, I guess my question is, are those references that they give us a list, or do we go out and find out who uses them and do cold calls?
Yeah, in all bid processes, they provide you the reference list.
Yeah, so I think references are nice to have, but usually you provide references where you know someone's going to speak highly of you. So, you know, maybe references should be removed and put more weight into, you know, maybe some services. Maybe Kayla has some ideas that she's floating around of how to reduce waste. Is there like a hard to recycle item opportunity? You know, we've discussed some of these in other agenda items in previous meetings. So I think her viewpoint could be really useful, and have a nice collaboration with some of these criteria. Also with equipment, you know, do we want to weigh it a little differently doing electric equipment or equipment that uses less fuel, that sort of thing. So yeah, reimagining the criteria I think is really important. Let's see what else I had here. There was an idea floated out there about increasing beyond 100% the changes in bins. You know, I don't necessarily know that that's something that would be of benefit to citizens in the community, especially when there's some variables that are outside of our control, like the changes in composting that then requires us to maybe put some more stuff in the trash bin that we didn't before. But I do like, to the mayor's point earlier, his point of the incremental increase that we did before to help encourage people to change their habits. Other than that, I would rely on the expertise of the finance committee and those like Kayla to make some decisions of the criteria and propose those.
Any more discussion or direction? So I guess we're beyond public comment. Thank you. I would ask the director, do you feel like you've gotten enough input to work with the finance committee and develop new RFP criteria to address these thoughts?
I do.
Okay.
Would you like me to address any of the questions from the public at this point? Or?
Sure.
Okay, just, we do receive certificates from the haulers for recycle and compost of where those loads go. Then we get notification, like with the new composting rules, when a load is rejected. So that's something that's required from all haulers. It's no different from one or the other. Prevention and reduction, we do mailers with whoever wins our bid, and we work with whatever the Boulder County Recycling Facility or A1 Organics is providing for what they'll accept, and try to send out those mailers of put this here, put that there, and stickers on your cans. So that's pretty equal. I think a big thing to keep in mind with any HOA can opt into our program. In fact, North End did opt into our program during this last few years. So that can happen. That's already in place. Multifamilies are a little more challenging. They require a different type of truck than what we use for the residential service. So what we would advise is if the council wants to incentivize multifamily or commercial, those are more individual things that should be done through ordinance so that you can incentivize what you want, but allow people to get the most competitive service for their type of waste stream, especially when you get into commercial and industrial. And I think we covered everything. As far as Marshall service, they work for us, these haulers, and so we're going to provide our service for waste just like we're going to provide water on day one. Now, are we going to have trouble getting the trucks through the neighborhoods on some days? It's possible. Those are things we work through with our code enforcement and some of our outside sources that are monitoring neighborhoods on a daily basis. So we will be watching and monitoring those things. But if someone moves back into a house, we'll make sure they have service. They won't have to wait till a certain portion of the neighborhood is built out. I think I addressed everything, but if there's something missing, let me know.
Any last comments on this item? All right, thank you, Director. We really appreciate you educating us and answering all of our questions. And we look forward to coming back with RFP information.
All right, thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to regular business agenda item D, discussion, direction, act. We're going to take a break. We will come back at 8:35. Thank you very much for letting me know. Yeah. Ready? All right, we're going to resume the Louisville City Council meeting. So we're on regular business, item D, discussion, direction, action, City Council consideration of Senate Bill 23-213 concerning state land use requirements. We'll ask the staff for a presentation.
Is this your last presentation, Megan?
I mean, I only expect it to be 35 minutes probably, so I'll keep it. I'm joking.
Could we take a break so we...
It will be brief. I only have a few slides. Okay. Good evening, Council. Megan Davis, Deputy City Manager. We're here this evening to discuss a state bill, Senate Bill 213, and it's concerning statewide land use. And we are coming to City Council for discussion and direction on this bill. We do have a legislative agenda that the City Council has approved for 2023. We don't have anything specific to the matters and issues, that are consistent with this bill. We do have some statements around local control, but this is a much broader and sort of deeper set of issues that are contained in this bill. So I'm just going to give you a very brief kind of overview of the bill, and then would ask City Council for direction if you would like to take a position on this legislation. So SB 213 is a statewide land use bill that creates standards and requirements for regulations, land use regulations in some municipalities with the goal of increasing affordable housing. It establishes 4 different groups of municipalities. Louisville is in the Tier 1 urban municipalities category, and so we would be subject to the majority of the requirements that are outlined within the bill. It impacts, it basically creates some assessment processes where the Department of Local Affairs would conduct statewide assessments around housing needs and housing strategies, and then make requirements for example, the Tier 1 urban municipalities for what they would have to do to fulfill the needs outside in the statewide assessment. There would also be local assessments that would need to be completed as well to understand kind of the local landscape needs and how they would be addressed by the strategies that are required in the bill. There are also a set of what they call model land use codes or model codes, but they would be required. So they're not model codes in the sense that we see like a model wild and urban interface code that you can kind of look to if you want to adopt portions of it. They actually would be codes that would be developed that you could adopt, or you'd be required to have the same set of standards that are consistent with the model code. And those are really around affordable housing planning, accessory dwelling units, what they call middle housing, which is higher density housing in single family housing areas. So that would be things like townhomes, ADUs, cottages, that type of thing to increase housing density. Transit-oriented housing or transit-oriented development, housing in key corridors, so those would be key transportation corridors as well as key kind of economic corridors, minimum parking requirements, PUD zoning, and then there's a water resources planning component as well. So it's very broad. It includes many components around housing and local areas that are typically governed by local land use. So I just want to kind of give you an overview of where we are in the bill. The bill was introduced about 2 weeks ago. It was assigned to local government and the Senate Local Government and Housing Committee. It's scheduled for committee hearing this Thursday. The committee chair is Senator Sonia Jacques Lewis, who was previously represented the city of Louisville. She now represents Longmont, Lafayette, and Erie, so she's within kind of our region. And there's information to sign up and testify if the council takes a position and council members would like to do so. So I wanted to just comment. I provided a lot of information in the bill from the Colorado Municipal League. This has a very significant impact on municipalities across the state, and so they have a significant amount of information around the bill, analysis around the bill. At the time I put this together, I did look to see if there was any other analysis from other organizations. I didn't find any, but since that time, we should note in the packet, SWEEP, Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, has provided their analysis for you, and then also ECHO, East County Housing Organization, has provided some analysis of a housing coalition as well. So you should have all of that information. I have looked for any other kind of analysis. I haven't found anything other than that at this point. Other information might emerge. So if you'd like to take a position on this, there's a couple things you could do. We could move forward with a resolution supporting or opposing the bill, sign on to CML's letter. CML has a sign-on letter for municipalities that are opposing the bill that is going to the General Assembly. You can, as members of council, then take action if you would like to talk to our Louisville delegation members. You can, staff can help set up those meetings for you. We can share positions with other kind of community organizations like the DBA, the Chamber, other organizations that might have some position or opinion on this bill as well. So that is those are kind of some of the options that you have for this evening. And then I have some suggested messaging depending on the position. If you do choose to oppose it following the CML recommendation, there's some language that can be used, and we can also put talking points together for you. And these are some things that staff has identified as potential impacts of the bill as well. So happy to answer questions, and I wouldn't claim to be, an expert on the 105 pages of this bill, but we can get back to you with any information if needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions about the presentation before we go to public comment? All right, so we'll go to public comment. Joshua Cooperman.
Joshua Cooperman. I live at 216 Griffith Street. All right, so first of all, I'd just like to say I don't really have an opinion about, on this issue, at least at the moment, about sort of local control versus state control. I think certain things should be controlled locally, certain things should be controlled by the state. On this, I'm not really informed enough to make a decision at the moment. So I really would just like to focus more on some of the content of the bill as opposed to who might be controlling that content. So I think the bill contains a lot of good ideas. I'm not sure if they're implemented in the right way or by the right jurisdictions or whatever, but I think there are some really good ideas in the bill. And from my perspective, these good ideas are about the intersection of housing affordability and environmental sustainability. So for instance, as was mentioned in the presentation, right, the bill has ideas for allowing more ADUs, more cottages, townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, things like that, higher density, which I think is a very good idea from both the perspective of affordability and sustainability. It has ideas about transit-oriented housing, which I think is also a great idea for both of those issues as well. And then it also has some ideas about water resource planning. It has ideas about maintaining agricultural lands, about conserving greenfields, and all kinds of things like that, which I think are also really good ideas. So, again, I'm not sure if these should be state-imposed ideas or not, but I do think that Louisville should pursue some of these ideas, irregardless of what happens with the bill. And we have been pursuing them some already. And I think with the housing study coming through, we're going to pursue them more so. And given the amount of pushback this bill seems to be getting, I think we might we are pursuing them by ourselves as it is. Yeah, so, and then I think just the last little comment I would make, I've definitely, again, I haven't looked through all 105 pages either. The one concern that I've seen raised in a few places is that the bill doesn't do enough to ensure affordability of the housing that it would provide. And I think that is a real concern. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else in the chamber? Sherry?
Getting to be kind of routine here. Joshua and I, Sherry Summer, 910 South Palisade Court. I find this extremely alarming, this idea that's being proposed by Governor Polis. Not that I understand all of it either, but what I think is that it seems like a very one-size-fits-all, top-down approach in which this is mandated and then local municipalities are left to figure out how to make all the pieces work. There are unintended consequences that we don't know about from something so sweeping. There are negative externalities that we would have to take care of. Like, what if the sewer plant needs an upgrade because there's much more demand? What if facilities like the city offices and the rec center and the library need to be upgraded? What about roads, wear and tear, and any kind of infrastructure upgrades? Those are all really expensive, and we would have to figure out what to do about all of those things. I don't quite understand how the water resources would work and if we would be able to continue with our development pays its own way policy. That's something to think about. I'm concerned about the areas where fire rebuilds have not happened and they're empty lots. What will happen there? I think we're especially vulnerable because of that open land. And if this goes through, that land's going to become a lot more valuable. There's no restriction on, money making, so people will come in and get top dollar. I just think it's very simplistic to rely on this idea of supply and demand. That's super simplistic economics. It's not going to work because demand comes from everywhere. And this is a great place to live. And so people who live in great places that are very expensive will say, oh, this is great. I can move to Colorado. And we just can't take it there. Air quality is already bad. We're strained for water. I'm for affordable housing, but I do think, like Joshua said, they need to put in some income. Ooh, I still have some time. Some income or affordability clauses. And I think we can figure out a better plan than this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the chamber? Seeing none, we'll move on to Zoom. First, we have Russell Moore.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, I strongly encourage you, City Council, to take a strong stand to register your opposition on behalf of the citizens of Louisville to Senate Bill 23. My rationale has very little to do with the contents of the bill, but it does have more to do, has everything to do with the state's usurping our local control over issues on housing that I think we're best equipped to deal with. Also, I resonate with the last commenter that this one-size-fits-all approach, I think, is a very, very poor approach. We have lots of different municipalities in the state, and I think we should be left with the authority to deal with our housing issues as we see fit, as is best suited for the city of Louisville. Thank you.
Thank you. Next time we have Anne Marie Jensen.
Hi there, Anne Marie Jensen, and I'm with the East County Housing Opportunity Coalition. And I do have to say, I have read the bill 3 times and spent quite a bit of time with it. And I think some of the speakers have mentioned that it doesn't really create affordable housing. It operates on the premise that increasing the supply will inherently lower the costs. And I'm not going to speak to the what is the proper role of the state versus the local government. In some ways, I think that's a legal issue, but I will say that I think around the state, many communities have done a very poor job of building affordable housing, and many don't intend to. I've had residents in our area tell me they don't intend or want affordable housing in our area. I don't think it's a one size fits all approach. I think it leaves a lot to the Department of Local Affairs to create rules. And from those rules, the city will be able to choose options that work for it. So I don't think it's quite as top down as many people think it is, but I think it also lacks enforcement. It lacks a robust community input process. And it doesn't really deal with displacement of what if, as you build new housing, for example, in the mobile home park, if you should build it on South Boulder Road and via Appia, what happens if you build affordable housing there and displace the existing residents? And how do you enforce that they have some rights in this process? In general, I think you should look at it with an open mind and think about how it's bringing to the fore some very important issues in our state. And also, you've got a neighboring community that has zero affordable housing. And in those situations, you end up carrying the burden of those other communities. And what this intends to do is to spread that burden throughout the state and have each community do its fair share. And as a community that's tried to do something about affordable housing, I think you should be open to this kind of approach. So I encourage you to look at it with an open mind. And I know CML is strongly opposed because of the local control part, but there's a reason why this revolutionary kind of bill is being proposed, because not much has been being done and local government has been slow to respond. So thanks for your time, and I appreciate your consideration of this bill.
Thank you. Next up, we have M. Redpath.
Yes, thank you. I lived at 911 Arapahoe Circle. I'm planning to rebuild. My name is Mark Redpath, and I agree with Russell, and I urge you to oppose this. And we've already started down the road of working towards these solutions. I think that certainly we can determine what's best for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we have one more just came up, went away. Any more comments on Zoom? KTMCCOY.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I'm opposed to SB 23213, and I hope the city will take a stance of opposition about this Senate bill. It doesn't create more affordable housing. It creates more housing, but it's not affordable. It just reminds me of an overreach of a government for creating something that they don't know the result of what they're demanding from their cities. The federal government seems at this point to want to get rid of single family neighborhoods under the guise of affordable housing. But I think it's a lot more insidious. Think about China. Anyone who has been to China, spent time with the Chinese people and Chinese families, knew about how the destruction of the hutongs has gone for them. We have destroyed family neighborhoods. They have destroyed family neighborhoods for the better of the masses, but it destroys a continuity of a neighborhood. I have been in Louisville for over 31 years. It's the only place on Arapahoe Circle where I live that I ever owned. If I didn't lose my home, if I didn't lose everything that was important to me or that showed my accomplishments in life, climbing all the 14ers, being a pharmacist for over 40 years, all the music that I've attended in person, I lost everything. I really don't think I would have attended the meeting tonight in person. I had to leave because of certain smells that were going on in the council chambers, but I don't think I would even care about this. But I do care because our neighborhood, Centennial 8, was destroyed. And now I fear that the city is going to cater to builders and people coming in from out of state to put up whatever they want to put up in our neighborhood. So every month it seems we have another stressor. We had ADU situation last month, and now we have this Senate bill. It's just too much. And I feel it's really will impact our neighborhoods. And let's talk about all the wording in this bill. I read it. Prohibit, prohibit, prohibit. Also, more density, more stress, more crime, but we have less police. These are all issues we have to think about. And I hope the city takes a strong stance against not doing it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next up, we have Rick Rutt.
Okay, can you folks hear me over there?
Yes, we can.
Yes, my name's Rick Ratajczyk. I was there a little earlier and I decided to go home, watch a hockey game here. But I wanted to make a comment about this bill. I do strongly oppose it. I think the city of Louisville, as I mentioned before, had an opportunity to have an experiment or create an experiment in affordable housing. We have Red Tail Ridge. We had the opportunity to put businesses out there, put in a large apartment complex that could be zoned, have some units allocated for affordable housing for people. You have the opportunity to build a road out there so that you can have a safety net for the Monarch schools in case of an emergency. I personally don't think dropping affordable housing in a single housing area, densifying the area more than is necessary is a good idea. It, as mentioned before, it's not good. It makes it more difficult for the police, and it doesn't do any good for the neighborhood as far as trying to find parking or dealing with parking. So if the city is looking to have an experiment and wants to do this, you know, we got 400 acres out there. Let's get some businesses out there, build some apartments. Right now, the only people that are going to take advantage of that place is Broomfield because they're right next to it. And I personally don't want to use our taxpayer dollars to support Broomfield residents coming to Red Tail Ridge and using it as an open space. And I think I had enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that concludes our public comments for this particular topic. Council discussion. Councilor Hefner.
I'll go ahead. I just have a handful of points. So I want to start off by saying I think the CML analysis is maybe a little overstated. I think it comes off maybe in some respects as you know, a little on the overcautious side, and this is an important statewide issue. I think we need only look to the ski towns and what's happening in the ski towns to see what's coming for the Front Range, right? Where a lot of municipalities in ski country really don't allow much new development and have very restrictive zoning. And they're at the point now where a number of them are trying to rejigger their affordable housing definitions so that doctors can buy homes, right? And we don't want to end up there. And although I don't think the bill as currently drafted is necessarily the way to get there, I don't think the intention is all bad. Affordable housing isn't a problem that Louisville is going to solve on its own, or that Boulder is going to solve on its own, or that any municipality is going to solve on its own. And having some sort of statewide expectation isn't necessarily a bad idea. I think that being said, the bill we have in front of us isn't perfect. I think it's asking an awful lot of the Department of Local Affairs, which is still trying to implement the last affordable housing statewide ballot initiative and hasn't quite finished yet. And to dump 100 new pages of regulatory authority on their lap strikes me as a pretty heavy lift for them. I thought the comments we heard from the East County Housing Coalition, I hope I got that right, from Ms. Jensen, were persuasive that we need to be thoughtful about this and take a thoughtful approach. So I guess where I'm leaning right now is against signing on to the CML letter, and I would sort of favor an approach of wait and see, look at it when it comes out of committee, see if there are amendments to it, and then have a thoughtful discussion after that. But I personally, I don't know that we want to oppose sort of at all costs or take an opposed position that we can't come back and revisit later if there are good amendments to the bill.
Thank you. Councilor Lay.
Yeah, this one is, this is a really interesting response to what I think is a really complicated problem. I guess, first of all, I'm a bit disappointed that in the process by which it was created, it's obviously the assumption is that municipalities are the problem, and that the bill wasn't, the bill's language wasn't something that the folks who were crafting it thought municipalities could provide a particularly useful analysis and suggestions about it. So that is something that I think it's more a comment on our politics maybe. I do understand that there is reticence around the state and certain municipalities for contributing to increased housing and affordable housing in particular. But I don't think that every municipality is the problem, and it's just unfortunate that I think we're at that point. All that said, I think there's a couple of things I can say. I mean, we are, as city council folks, I think, charged with the responsibility of land use in our community. That's a really fundamental responsibility. And it's not something we can just simply say, oh, let's just give that away to somebody else. So my first reaction is it takes away, I think, an unusual and in an unjustifiable way our, as it's written, our responsibility, our authority for making those decisions. I think that we have a lot of things that we have done on affordability. I think I'm pretty proud of, and I think we all can be pretty proud of the pledge in Boulder County of most of the communities in Boulder County to contribute to affordable housing over the course of the next few years. And I think that is a really important distinction between us and other counties. And it's not a matter of pounding other counties and saying they're horrible. It's just a way of saying, not every community is the same and deserves the same kind of heavy-handed approach. I'm likewise not convinced, as a number of people have said already, that it's going to result in a lot more affordable housing. I think it's going to result in, as is, would result in more housing. There's no question. How much of it will be affordable? and at what cost to, local control and local adjustments to local conditions, I think is an open question. There's also, plenty of mandates here and very little money. I mean, $20 million, I think, is the number that's attached to it right now. I'm sure that's going to probably change, but that's not very much money to accomplish some of these things. Now, that's sort of all the things and all the reasons why I think we can't really endorse it, and I think we have to oppose it in some ways. I think, as Councilmember Hefner said, these problems are real. Every community has a different way of dealing with them, but the need is to try to move expeditiously. We know that perhaps municipalities, and maybe we in particular among municipalities, we don't move as fast as we'd really like to on some of this. I understand that that's part of the frustration that probably the governor and others have with us, and why we weren't sort of brought into the process initially. And so that's something that makes me want to do better on our own process. I think there's some ideas in this legislation that are good ones, and I think we can emphasize ones that are good. I appreciate the transit-oriented development pieces of it. There are, and there are other pieces of it. I think what I am really appreciative of, Emery Jensen mentioned this a little bit, is, take an open-minded approach. And I may not sound open-minded. I am. I think there are things that we need to look at pretty closely as a community and as a community among communities. I just don't know that this bill, as it's written, is the way we ought to go. And I'm not sure, that I want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that there's CML. I went to the presentation by CML, or I tuned into it, as I think the Mayor Pro Tem did and others. They took a really hardline approach, at least from the organization standpoint. And one person that I really appreciated was somebody from the Colorado Springs City Council said, although there may be some problems, especially the ones that are pretty fundamental on local control, they're good ideas. We ought to emphasize the good ideas. We ought to try to find common ground, even though this kind of was born in a not very common ground approach to policymaking. And I think that's frankly where I'm landing on this. I think it's, while I think it's important to register that we're opposed to it. I don't know that we have to register it in the way that the CML letter does. I'm not thoroughly opposed to that, but I think we need to find ways, and we need not to be defiant about finding ways in what we've done so far, in what we can do, not just ourselves, but with other communities. And I'm kind of hopeful that there'll be enough, that we can have some input, because I know that our legislators are looking for that. So I think it's got some good ideas. I think it needs a lot of work. That's kind of where I'm at right now. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to have Councilor Most, and we'll go to Councilor Dickinson, and then we'll go to Mayor Pro Tem Fahey.
So I think I agree with Council Members Lay and Hoffner in that I don't think we should endorse the CML position. What I guess I would like to see would be, and I think Councilmember Lay spoke to this, let's identify the things in this bill that we think are positive, and let's identify the thing that we don't, which is basically we don't want control. And I will preface, well, I shouldn't preface, I'm not prefacing. I will add, sorry, my brain hurts. I was up cooking for Passover late last night. I think that this is a wake-up call for every community in the state. We need to get serious about this. And I don't think we've done enough. And I understand we have certainly done things, and I know that those who've been on the council for a long time, particularly, are like, yeah, but look what we've done. And I'm feeling like, yeah, it's not enough. I think we need to get more aggressive. And I think there's a number of things we're going to be doing this year that are going to help us get there. We're redoing the comp plan so we can really think about, with community input, what kind of zoning changes we need to actually make more housing and more affordable housing in appropriate locations within the community. We are looking at housing. We're doing a housing study, and that I think is going to give us a lot of really good information. And so what I would like us to do, I mean, I'm happy with saying, yeah, we don't approve of this, whatever. I don't want to go the CML route, but I think that we're on a good path. And what I would encourage as a council, as a staff, as a community, that we think more aggressively as we're going through our processes this year about a housing study and the comp plan, about how we can make some bold changes in our community. I think we're also looking at, the sketch plan process. And I think together, these things that we're working on are going to set us up so that in 2024, we can be perhaps a little more aggressive and a little bolder. And so I went to the town hall meeting last night with our Representative Brown and our state Senator Denberg and basically, or Fenberg, sorry, and they basically said the bill in its current form is not going to be the bill that we're going to end up with. So I think there's going to be a lot of wrangling. I would hope that where they end up with this bill and where we end up with our process this year, that whatever happens, it's not going to be some dramatic accommodation that we have to make. I think this bill in some form is likely to pass because the governor is really strongly supporting of it. So I think if we can find ways to communicate effectively about things that we think are positive, that we think will be helpful for our community, at the same time that we are opposed to sort of the big hand of the state coming in and telling us we can't control our own land use. I think if we can do that, I think that would be an effective way to go.
Thank you, Councilor Dickinson.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's super complicated. I appreciate the comments of the people who have spoken before me, and of course, the public spoke on it. I think I'm not currently in support of SB 23-213 as written, so I don't want to go in the direction of a letter of support. I don't agree with CML's letter and don't want to sign on to that either. I think what I'm thinking about is the intention, right? What is the intention of this? Why are these people doing this, right? Like, it's a big power grab. It's all these things. It's like there's a national crisis, there's a state housing crisis, and we're looking for solutions. So this may not be it, and this may not do it correctly in all the ways. Maybe, as Chris said, more mandates than are comfortable. But I think there are like two issues. One is us being able to be in control of our own community. And I think that is important. And I do hear people's concern about that, is this is an overreach and we don't want to give up our land use decisions because it's a really important part of our community. At the same time, if you think of Louisville as a bubble, and a lot of people do, but if you think of us as living in a bubble and in order to be self-sustaining as a community, we aren't. Louisville isn't self-sustaining. We don't have manufacturing, for instance. We don't have a landfill. We don't have a recycling center. We don't have what we need in our community to be self-sustaining. And one of those topics is affordable housing. Louisville is not an affordable place to live currently. So what's the solution? If we were our own community responsible for everything, how would we provide affordable housing for people to live here? And right now the answer is live somewhere else. Live next door, live in the next city. We're not solving it. And so if the expectation is that the next city over is going to solve it, that's on us doing our job. And you can imagine from a statewide perspective, this doesn't work. You can't just have every city saying, I don't know, live somewhere else. We can't solve it here. So we need to do something that's systemic through the entire state to say, no, you can't have minimums on your square footage. No, you can't say you can't have some density here. No, you can't, So I don't know that this is right, and I don't want to be. I think what's interesting at Louisville is I do think, and Maxine is saying this, everyone's talking about this. We're putting the work in right now. I believe this council, this staff, this community is putting the work in on this topic, and I think we're moving forward in really good directions. And I do think we'll take some of the stuff that is in this and apply it ourselves. So I don't think we need necessarily the state to step in and tell us we have to. I think it's the direction we're moving because we have to. But I don't think we should just knee jerk say, hey, you can't tell us what to do. This would be a tough comparison, but it reminds me of like voting in the South. Like, don't tell us how to run our elections. We govern ourselves. We run our own elections. Yes, but if your elections are proven to be racist every year, then we're going to pass laws that say you can't run your own elections the way you want to. So you think about municipalities and what we're doing. If we're not dealing with the affordable housing crisis in our state, then some rules are going to be imposed on us so that we do it. And so do I want that? No. Do I want to sign on to this? No. But do we need to take this incredibly seriously? Yes. And maybe there's a version that comes out of this that is. But, you know, Chris mentioned this word earlier, and you know, speaking to him, I would be more interested in incentives for accomplishing these than mandates that say we have to without any funding. It's really easy to pass a mandate and say, hey, just go do it. It's a lot harder and more expensive and more complicated to say, let's work together to get it done. But I would like to see all of these things in a state bill that was more about, if you do X, we'll do Y. We'll partner with you to add more affordable housing. We'll partner with you. We'll help you with this ADU model code, and be more cooperative and helpful and not feel like a top-down mandate, but more of a resource and an aid in accomplishing our shared goals. So, you know, to sum up, I'll end where I started. I don't support the current bill, and I don't support the CML's opposition. I think what Dietrich said in a tenth of the time, I agree with. I think we need to kind of wait and see and look to see the progress over time of what this bill becomes, and can we support it later? Can we be a part of tweaking it? I think that would be a more useful approach instead of taking a really strong stance at this stage.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Fahey.
Thank you. Yes. I will say I'm also not in support of this bill. I'm also not in support of this very blunt denial or rejection by the CML. But I do want to, as Councilor Dickinson and Hefner both said, taking some of the suggestions and applying them in the city, and perhaps having an influence on what the state actually does come down with as a statewide requirement at a later date when they've decided, and maybe have some input in what they decide to change in this bill. Right now, one of my concerns as someone who's in between and across the street from 3 vacant lots in a residential neighborhood, if this goes through, according to the state, I could have a 6-unit apartment unit on each side of me and across the street and behind me. So that would not make me happy. And I don't think that there's anyone else in my neighborhood that would be pleased with that outcome either. There are other ways that could happen. We are already trying to get ADUs approved in the city, and that didn't even go over well with the residents that showed up. So this is just too many things that they're mandating, as Councilor Dickinson said. Let's try to get them to go with a carrot rather than a stick and see what they can compromise on.
Thank you. You know, I think when I look at this, it's really about a housing affordability. I mean, we have to believe there's good intention behind this. I believe there is good intention. I did read all 106 pages. you should see my notes. There's probably 50 objections I have along the way through that. So, you know, I appreciate how nice everybody is. I'm probably not as nice as my reaction to this as my colleagues, because to use the word that the Mayor Pro Tem used, you know, SB 23-213 is a blunt instrument. And to me, it was created to force a discussion. And to not have a strong reaction to the very first part of it that takes land use responsibility away from the city where the state can mandate it, just in the kind of example the Mayor Pro Tem laid out, is enough for me to want to totally reject the bill. Now, are there good things in the bill? Sure. You know, a lot of the things that we've talked about, TOD, affordable housing, workforce housing. I do like that it addresses some of the issues around utilities like water and, you know, water scarcity. But just building more housing doesn't solve a housing issue, and it doesn't make it affordable. Look at the city of Boulder. There's ADUs, if you go to some of the neighborhoods, almost ADUs in every house or attached in the backyard or whatever, just to house students. That doesn't make it affordable. It's one of the most expensive places to live. So that model, in my opinion, doesn't work in that situation, and I'm not sure it works here either. So, you know, my reaction is I don't 100% agree with what CML put together, but it makes a strong statement if we say we reject this bill on the face of it, and certainly we find aspects of it that make sense, that we believe in. We believe in the intention, but the tools that are being presented, especially the land use piece, is enough for me to say, we need to, you know, this is some level of political theater with the state legislators, with the representatives, the governor, and the senators, that, you know, at some point you have to say no. Sure, we'll come to the table now, we can discuss this, but to not take a strong position weakens our position, in my opinion. And so, if anything, if we don't want to sign the CML letter, and of course we could do that as individuals if we chose to, but I mean, one of the things I guess I would ask the deputy city manager, I mean, we could do a resolution articulating our, you know, distaste, or however we want to put this, our objections to the bill. But why wouldn't we join other municipalities who have a strong voice in this, really to force a better discussion? You know, the thing about this is, this bill came before it as a blunt instrument in the sense that it already had rulemaking. It's already saying, all right, cities, you don't get to make land use decisions. And, you know, a lot of these lots that were sold after the fire were bought by real estate companies out of California and New York and so forth. Well, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to maximize their return. And if this bill goes into place, you can bet they're going to put in sixplexes wherever they can to maximize their return on investment. So for me, we need to take a strong stand so that we can make those land use decisions and do it in such a way that meets the needs of the community and the wishes of the community. Other thoughts? Yes, Councilor Hamilton.
Thank you. So I think we're all in agreement that this topic is of utmost importance, and if nothing else, this bill is a reminder that we need to move as quick as possible to ensure that we meet our goals of affordable and inclusive housing. I think the people that work at my daughter's school should be able to live in Louisville, the town where they work. Earlier, or everyone's mentioned, I think pretty much everyone, that there are parts of this bill that could be useful or are worth considering locally, regardless of the outcome of the bill. I guess my question is, you mentioned earlier, Megan, the chamber and DBA, but could a few other groups maybe have some useful input like HPC? I don't know, does this impact our historic preservation, the Planning Commission, Monet? Are these individuals that could add value to either our letter or stance if we end up going down that route, or picking those topics in the bill that we do think are constructive and would add value to our goals?
You know, I think that there's a timeline associated with this. The state legislature is going to, they're going to adjourn, so they'll be done. Basically, I think May 6th is going to be their last day, and so this is going to move quickly. And so I'm not sure if getting that level of input on the bill itself is really realistic. However, I think with all the points that have been raised, specifically around the tools that are proposed in the bill, which certainly could be incorporated and discussed through our affordable housing planning process. And that could be a process during which we could get input on those tools and strategies from, the boards and commissions. Yeah.
Councilor Lay.
I'm looking back at this CML letter, and it's certainly strongly worded, and it's pretty negative, which I think is, at least from what I'm hearing amongst council members, something that isn't terribly attractive about it. But let me throw out something and see if there's any interest in this. I think there is a way maybe to have a little bit of both. I hear what you're saying, Mayor, about the need to make a strong stand. I think most of the points that the CML letter includes are actually are ones with which I have some agreement, but I think there's also a need for putting our own gloss on things. And I think there's a value of standing with other communities, because we're all in this at some level together. And I think seeing that is something that's important for the legislature and the governor to see. So I'm sort of, I could do it, or if council decides they don't want to do it, I guess decide against it. But I'm not, on the face of it, against signing that letter. I think it is worth describing our own situation, both in terms of some of the things we think are useful and in taking credit for the things that we're doing right now. And so I could see doing a bit of both without those being inconsistent. And frankly, I mean, it does remind me a little bit of the comments of that one council member who certainly felt a similar pull of, yeah, there's some things about this that are fundamentally incorrect that we really need to take a stand about. But, there's some positives too. So I wonder if there's any interest, on council at doing both and not one or the other.
Councilor Hamilton.
Thank you. I just want to add to that making our own letter or statement allows us the opportunity to highlight the unique circumstances of Marshall Fire and that impact on our community. So I think that's something to consider in the decision we make tonight. I think that's a really, really important topic that maybe wasn't considered when this bill was drafted, but it is a unique circumstance in our community, and a large part of our community could be impacted in that way.
Councilor Hefner.
I would just say I appreciate the creative idea, Councilmember Lay. I just think given the sort of the package that CML has put together, I find it too challenging to sign on to that as a city. I think it's pointed in a direction that really isn't doesn't feel consistent with all the things you talked about that we've been doing and sort of our vision in this area. And so I would be hesitant to jump onto that. I like the idea of doing our own letter or our own statement, or even, given the timing issue we just heard about, trying to have staff sort of hear everything that was talked about tonight and work with our state legislators to try and push this in the right direction.
So, Deputy City Manager, given the things that you heard in the last few comments, do you have a recommendation of how we could move forward?
If you would like to make a statement or take some action, I think in a resolution, we could probably capture the sentiments and the comments that were made and sort of the balancing of the concerns around the local control and local land use powers, as well as the importance of affordable housing. So I think that would be a route that you could go, or you could decide, not to take a position on it. And, I've taken very good notes. We can convey to the legislators what the kind of positions on council are around this. So I would suggest either of those avenues.
Yeah, so I have two people who are got their hand up right now. So I have Councilor Dickinson and Councilor Lay. So just point of clarification, we don't have a regular meeting. We have one next week, and then we don't have one until May 2nd, which is way too late. So is it possible to do a resolution by next Tuesday?
Yeah, I think we could put something together for next Tuesday, and we could be on the consent agenda, or if you felt you needed to have discussion, you could pull it off.
Okay, I just wanted to get that tactical information. Councilor Dickinson, and then we'll go to Councilor Lay.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good direction. I think that what I heard consistently is that we're generally in support of the intent of providing affordable housing and trying to help municipalities do that. And we're against losing local control over our land use decisions entirely. And so we're very much in opposition of parts of it and very much in support of parts of it. And we want that to be clear. And then as Councilmember Hamilton said, we're a special city right now with Superior and Bullitt County unincorporated that we have some other pieces to consider right now. So I think it's appropriate, and I like this direction.
Others? Yes, Councilor Lay.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the comments that have been made. I think, one of the things that I heard from everybody and where I think most people was they were opposed to the bill as it was written or as it is written, which of course by next Tuesday may be radically different, who knows, but probably not enough that we are going to be able to either oppose or reject it. But I think there's a benefit to saying that we oppose it as it was introduced. I mean, just the kinds of things that we're talking about. That's not what CML's is, we urge opposition, just it's not a very, as nuanced an approach. But there's some things in that letter that may be useful. All of the things we've talked about here are things that I think are really important. I agree with Councilmember Hamilton's comment about Louisville as a, we've got specific concerns about this. And, at some level, I was thinking about this last night, and I don't know, how to do this, but, it may be that we end up in a place where we may want to prevail on some of the legislators to try to accommodate some special circumstances in Louisville on some of the bill that ends up making its way to the governor's desk. So having a real nuanced approach could be really, really helpful.
So I'm going to ask the Deputy City Manager, are we asking you and the City Attorney to do a doable job by next Tuesday?
Yes.
Okay.
We can do that.
I wanted to make sure that before I poll my colleagues. And so does everybody agree with the approach of having staff write a resolution which we can review as part of our consent agenda next week. We can obviously pull it off if we want to discuss it, but that would be our approach. So give me a thumbs up. Caleb, just say yes or no. Okay, good. Hey, I can see you. That's great. All right, so thank you very much for your support, outgoing Deputy City Manager. One huge task to end your week, but thank you. It's your fault that we're asking you to do this.
It's an important bell.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you for that discussion. I think that was very fruitful, and I appreciate everybody's energy around that city attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no report this evening. I just appreciate getting one more task that I get to work on with Deputy City Manager Davis before she leaves.
That's why we actually did this.
Yes, I appreciate that.
All right, so council comments, committee reports, and identification of future agenda items. I just want to make an announcement. April 11th meeting will be a Zoom meeting, so there'll be no in-person meeting that day. Other comments, reports, or identification of future items? Seeing none, we're adjourned.